Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. Happy to have you on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Hopefully, all of you had a wonderful weekend. Hopefully, all of you are making plans for next weekend. And hopefully, we could get through the week in between. Our show today and every day is brought to you by friends at Big Willie's, 1717 South Main. I keep telling you, I say it over and over, it's the best place to go and watch a game. Well, if you have not done it yet, I've got good news for you. They got NBA playoffs tonight. Western Conference Finals begin tonight. It's going to be a fascinating series between Oklahoma City and San Antonio. They'll have it on all the big screens, and it's a perfect time for you to get down there, try out the incredible craft food menu, take advantage of the drink specials if you're so inclined. Tell Patrick, Michelle, and the rest of the crew that you heard about it on the Sean O'Connell Show. They'll take extra special care of you. Big Willie's is at 1717 South Main Street. All right, it's a big weekend in the sports landscape. We talked about what might happen over the weekend on Friday, and Cleveland closes it out. They're headed to the Eastern Conference Finals against New York. That'll begin tomorrow. Donovan Mitchell has now achieved something that he's doing something in Cleveland that the Utah Jazz and all of us that were fans of Don and fans of what was happening while he was in Salt Lake City, I think, thought he was capable of. And you saw, like, you haven't throughout these playoffs always in every game seen the very best version of Donovan Mitchell, but I think in the closeout game, you did see the best version of Donovan Mitchell, where he is a guy that can be ball dominant, can be the scorer, can be the guy who scores you, 39 points and a half, or he could be somebody that plays a more traditional point guardish role and facilitates for teammates, still gets a lot of attention from an opposing team's either best or second best defender, draws things away, and then finds open teammates. And I think we saw a really good version of that from Donovan Mitchell. Now, can you carry that same thing consistently through a 7-game series against a red-hot New York Knicks team? Well, I guess part of that depends on whether or not the New York Knicks are able to stay red-hot given the amount of rest that they've had. Probably much more interestingly in the NBA is tonight's game, the beginning of a Western Conference final, where the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think, they battle for what a lot of folks might think is sort of the de facto NBA Finals matchup. I mean, we do this all the time. We do this in the NFL. We do this in the NBA. We're doing it this year, in my opinion, in the NHL, where it's like, all right, the winner of this series is the actual eventual winner of the championship. And I think a lot of people view this San Antonio OKC series that way. And if you're a Jazz fan, which I know most of you are, when your franchise has kind of checked all these boxes this year, oh man, gotta use some of this abundance of draft capital to bring in maybe a veteran player that can help us. Oh, Jaren Jackson Jr., okay, check that box. Got to get better defensively. Well, he's a former defensive player of the year, so he's supposed to take care of that for you as well. All right, so maybe two birds with one stone on that one. Hey, we still got a tank, guys. We still got to maintain our top pick. And for so much of the year, our question was whether or not you're going to lose the pick to Oklahoma City. It honestly dominated the conversation more during the regular season than, hey, is there a chance this is going to be the number one pick? Is there a chance this is going to be the number two pick? Is there a chance this is going to translate to AJ DeBonsa? I had put that outside of mind because this Jazz team was flirting so much with being better than they needed to be. But they've checked the boxes. Now you've got to figure out the Walker Kessler extension. Got to check that box. And eventually, when you've kind of done all the in-house stuff, you're going to be able to turn your attention to, all right, now who are we going to chase? Like, what are we competing with? And if you do that right now, if you make that shift in focus right now, it is a terrifying realization as a Utah Jazz fan that the young Oklahoma City team is going to be together for quite some time, and that their back-to-back MVP is probably not going to slow down anytime soon, and that the rule changes in the NBA are not going to focus around him and his acting and his free throw merchant status. So he's going to be that dude for the next several years. And then you're like, all right, well, maybe something crazy will happen there. And then you're like, oh, wait, San Antonio. Oh, Victor Wembanyama. San Antonio is even younger than Oklahoma City. And their superstar is not even in his prime yet, hasn't been an MVP yet. All of us know that someday he will be. And so they're going to be hanging around in front of us. And then you look at it and you say, all right, well, if it's just those two, maybe we can bully our way into a Western Conference Finals against one of them. Maybe somehow the seeding will work out someday so they have to play each other earlier on, and then we could catch the next team on the flip side. And I think you look at it, you're like, maybe we could be Minnesota. And if you're Minnesota, you're looking at it right now and you're going like, what the bleep do we have to do to get over the hump? We thought we had done it the last couple of years. We're the right matchup for Denver, got them out of our hair. We're the right matchup for LA, I think. We're the right matchup for all these different teams. And we thought maybe, just maybe, we were the right matchup for San Antonio, but turns out we're not. And Anthony Edwards is checking out of a game down 30 with 8 minutes left, drawing attention to the fact that we're not even competitive enough to have our superstar playing to the final minutes of the game. That sucks if you're Minnesota. They haven't done it. They did a lot of things right recently. So the NBA, man, it is a tough, tough hill to climb. We'll talk about that with Gordy Chiesa when he joins us on the show. That's coming up. We're going to do Monday and Wednesday with Gordy this week instead of Tuesday and Thursday with Gordy, because Thursday and Friday I've got PFL duties. So Gordy on Monday's show and on Wednesday's show. I know that a lot of you tune in just to hear Gordy, which makes perfect sense to me because I would do the same thing. It'll be today and it'll be Wednesday. Also on the show today, we're going to check in with the potential number 2 overall pick. We're going to get as much update as we can, enough insight as we can on Darren Peterson through the voice of Kansas men's basketball. Brian Haney is going to swing by. Looking forward to that conversation because there's a lot of questions around Darren Peterson, and right now I'm putting him in the same category that we all put Ace Bailey in last year. Like, I don't know about this guy. And we were pretty, I think, foolish, those of us who did put Ace Bailey in that conversation last year. Like, I don't know, is that really the kind of guy you want? If all these rumors are true about him not wanting to be here, I don't know, man. And look, that was wrong. We were wrong. I'm happy to admit that. I'm very happy to admit it, actually, because it's worked out very nicely for the Utah Jazz. So we'll check in with the voice of Kansas basketball, Brian Haney, on Darren Peterson and what he thinks that young man is going to be in the NBA. I also want to know how Kansas fans feel about Darren, because it was a complicated year, right? If BYU fans had brought in A.J. DeBonsa and A.J. had not been the absolute treasure that he was, if he had pulled himself out of games and he had kind of vague, weird health problems, and your head coach had sat down at a couple of press conferences and expressed his own frustration and been like, yeah, man, I don't know. Now, Kansas got the messaging corrected toward the end of the season, but there's plenty of time, if you were a Kansas basketball fan, to build up resentment. Might be the wrong word, but no, I think resentment might be the right word. At least a little, like, mild animosity, or at the very least skepticism of the young player. Now, thankfully, if you were a BYU fan, you didn't have to deal with that with AJ, because what he did is he came in and he delivered on kind of everything, every little bit of hype that had preceded him and that followed him. I look forward to that conversation. That's coming up at 1 o'clock on the show. Brian Haney from Kansas men's basketball to talk mostly Darren Peterson and also a little bit of the NIL landscape, which is right now, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is getting pretty crazy. Here's some fun figures for you. This is from Ross Dellinger in an article that he was reporting on. Does a really, really good job, by the way. If you're not already following Ross Dellinger, it's Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports. He dabbles in the NIL space. We've talked about this. We touched on it briefly. The Nebraska football team had 18 NIL deals that were canned by the CSC. The College Sports Commission is the enforcing body on the House settlement, the new rules of what NIL is supposed to be, right? The legitimacy of the transaction is evaluated and or approved by the College Sports Commission. They function as the NCAA enforcement arm used to. We've talked about this. As soon as this thing was formed, if you go back to our show, you can pull it up on the archives at ESPN700sports.com or on the ESPN 700 app. You go back to what we were talking about then, and we were pessimistically skeptical of the idea that this CSC was going to come in and, A, have any kind of enforcement authority in the first place, B, have the capacity to try to evaluate all of these deals because they were going to be flooded. They were understaffed. They were completely overwhelmed. And we questioned how long it would last. The buy-in from especially the Big Ten and the SEC, but certainly even from the big-time players in ACC and Big 12 football, and even like the Boise States of the world, right? Because Boise has been the punching bag of these enforcement policies for years. They've made examples out of Boise, the NCAA used to at least, not the College Sports Commission. And so I was always like, all right, what is this body actually going to look like? And here we are, less than a full year later, and already there's some rumblings, some rumors that the Big Ten and the SEC especially, but again, the major power players in college football are more strongly considering a breakaway than they ever have. And the frustration comes on that front from exactly what Nebraska just dealt with. Now, Nebraska took it all the way to court and said, no, these are legitimate NIL deals. You've turned these away. This is compensation that these players deserve, which in the modern landscape of college football is probably true. They're probably good enough players that they deserve to be paid. But remember, the NCAA rules are supposed to be that, well, you have to have proven that, and you have to actually do something in order to receive the compensation. If your college football team is funneling money through, I don't know, like random Volkswagen Jettas to people, well, they better be doing a Volkswagen commercial. If your favorite college football player has a scholarship that is accessorized with money from a, I don't know, hotel chain, they better be doing something for the hotel chain. If there's a Crumble cookie logo on every bit of clothing that player has, and as such he is receiving hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars from Crumble Cookie, that's an endorsement deal. That makes sense. The College Sports Commission is tasked with evaluating these things, and in the Nebraska case, they basically were like, no, this is pay for play. You used a collective fund. You used a bunch of donor funds. That was just a big pool of money, and you said, you get this much, you get this much, you get this much. And you didn't make them do anything for it. You didn't make them voice a commercial. You didn't make them show up to a signing event. And so that money was not delivered to the players. The CSC said, nope, Nebraska, if you promised these guys this, you did not offer it in a legitimate way, we could penalize you for this. No, you can't have it. And the court upheld the decision, which emboldened and further strengthened the CSC. Right now, according to the article written by Yahoo Sports and Ross Dellinger, right now the amount of money tied up in the evaluation process is over $100 million of NIL deals to student athletes. And that, by the way, is all since January 1st this year. So when that transfer portal window opened, right, when Michigan came a-calling to J.J. Buchanan and John Henry Daly and said, this is the money that you're going to get, that money has to be vetted, that contract, that endorsement deal, that NIL compensation has to be vetted through the College Sports Commission, through the CSC. And if they determine, if they decide, as in many cases they have, excuse me, that no, that's not legitimate, we don't want that, we're not going to do that, you can't give the money to the player. And then what happens? Well, then the player and the player's agent and the player's parents are going like, hey, coach, what the bleep is this? You said we were going to get $2 million to play here in Ann Arbor. You said I was getting $5 million to move to Lubbock, Texas. You know there's only 2 targets here, coach? Hey, I was told I'd get $900,000 to go play tight end at BYU. That's why I transferred here. Why am I not being given this money? And that is why coaches are frustrated. Now, where are the frustrations coming in? It's mostly from the SEC and the Big Ten. And you want to know why it's mostly from the SEC and the Big Ten? Here's another number that's going to blow your socks off. James Peterson, by the way, producing today. He's back there pushing buttons, pretending he's doing important stuff. I like that. James, if I ask you what you estimate the number of dollars currently in the process, total dollars that have either been distributed already or have been funneled through the CSC, some have been approved, some have not been approved. Since January 1 this year, what do you think the dollar amount in Division I athletics of NIL money submitted to the CSC, these agreements, the total, what do you think it is since January 1? So, I mean, that's a large sample, but it's 5.5 months. It's not like going back to the beginning of NIL. This year, how much paperwork or how much money is on that paperwork, you think, total?
60 million? 100 million?
It's $250 million.
$250 million, okay.
It's $250 million. Now, that's all the Power 4 conferences and whatever the other stuff, whatever the new Pac-12 is offering. Like, I have on good authority that teams like Utah State, Fresno State, Colorado State, there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 players. There's a small handful of players at each of those institutions that's being offered some kind of NIL deal. And by the way, in most cases in those places, they're very legitimate NIL deals where there's one wealthy donor, one wealthy business owner who's like, this person is my endorser, whatever. So the CSC is signing off on most of those deals. Okay, so $250 million, according to the Yahoo Sports article, is kind of on the books so far, either being distributed or being tied up because there's questions about whether or not it's legitimate. How much of that money do you think is going only to the Big Ten or the SEC, or was submitted, I should say, by Big Ten or SEC schools? $250 million total. What percentage of that do you think is going through the 2 big boy players in college sports right now?
I have no idea, so my guess is probably gonna be way off, just like the first one was. But 75%.
You're dead on.
Wow,
it's 75%. That's about $190 million.
I take that back. I knew the whole time. All right, I knew that the whole time. No, I thought it was gonna be high, but I thought that I was gonna go way higher. Like I went way lower the first time.
Now, some of that's a function of numbers, right? like the actual number of teams that are in those conferences. That's a big, big chunk of the Power Four.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring that up because they have more than the ACC and the SEC and Big Ten are, I think, more than the ACC and Big 12
That's
combined by like one or two.
They have
maybe a little bit more.
Well, there's 18 teams now in the Big Ten, right?
Yeah, is it 16 in the SEC though? So, and I think there's 17 in the ACC.
Okay, so
I'm not wrong. I know it's an odd number.
They've got an extra couple of teams.
Yeah.
Now, the more important number is when you look at especially the Big Ten, and this is part of why they're back as kings and queens of college sports right now. Last 3 college football national championships, current number 1 ranked baseball team in the country, the men's and women's NCAA basketball champions, all in the Big Ten Conference. But the most important number here is the population centers that these Big Ten universities are in. Now, remember, they're California all the way to the East Coast, to the New York, New Jersey metro area. They're scattered across the entire United States. And with all due respect and love to our current status in the Big 12 in the truck stop conference, like, there's a reason it's called that, right? The reason the Big Ten wanted UCLA and USC, they really only wanted USC, but the reason they took both is because of the Los Angeles market. And I lamented how much we talked about television market size, and fans should not have to care, and I still believe that. But when you've got teams in Chicago, when you've got teams in the greater Detroit metro, when you've got teams in fairly large cities like Columbus, when you've got teams in Seattle, and you've got teams in LA, and you've got teams in New York, New Jersey area, yeah, I don't care how many available televisions. And as a sports fan, I don't think you should. I think it's a stupid, stupid metric that all of us got sucked into. And by the way, Indiana is not successful because of the massive television market that they're in right now. But when you're talking about NIL deals and you're talking about especially the legitimate ones that are going to be cleared by the CSC, what do those big cities have more of? What do those big cities have that maybe other smaller markets don't? Well, it's corporations.
Corporations mean more money.
It's headquarters. It's and like even in the case of Oregon, it's not a big metro. Eugene is not a big television metro. Even Portland is not that big of a television metro, but it just so happens to be the Nike headquarters, right? So the Big Ten has that embarrassment of riches, and that's hyper relevant to this conversation because the Big Ten and its universities that are now the most powerful universities and athletic departments in the country, and the corporate sponsors and partners of those universities are looking at the CSC and just be like, who are you? Can you imagine being Phil Knight, right? You have created not just a successful company, but you have created now a decades-long empire of sports equipment and apparel and cultural relevance that, I mean, there are very few stories of American bootstraps that have gone the way that Nike has. And I know you're out there listening to they've got sweatshops. I'm not glorifying that version of Nike. I'm not glorifying that part of it. But if you're Phil Knight and you're like, some CSC email comes through, just be like, hey, we're flagging the $1 million that you offered to this offensive tackle from Bingham High School in South Jordan, Utah. That's pay for play. That's not a legitimate NIL deal. And you're just going, I'm Phil Knight. You don't tell me what's good or what's not good. I want that, and we're going to get it, and you can't tell me otherwise. Now, that CSC person has done their job probably the right way and is going with the letter of the law. And Phil Knight doesn't care about the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. Phil Knight cares about Oregon winning a national championship before he dies, and he's in his mid-80s. And so he's like, what do we need the CSC for? And he picks up a phone, and he calls the chancellor down at USC. Hey, do you need the CSC? And that person is just like, no, we do. Come on, we do, Phil, we do. And then he calls up the guy at Michigan, Jordan Brand School. Do you really feel like you need the CSC? Oh, you know what? We had the same problem. We wanted these 2 transfers to come from the University of Utah with the coach, and the CSC's tying up some of their money. So now they're like, well, are we going to get this money or not? The power players in college football, according to this article, are looking at 75% of the total NIL money going through 2 conferences, Big Ten, SEC. And in those conferences, they are questioning on every level whether or not the House settlement can be restructured, whether or not the CSC and the enforcement arm of the NCAA is even relevant to what they're doing. Who told you this was going to happen less than a year ago? This is the most predictable outcome possible, where coaches, athletic directors, university presidents, and brand partners and sponsors are raising an eyebrow when they say, so you're telling me that I secured these funds from our donor base, that I wrangled $100 million. That's too big of a number. That I wrangled $40 million for the University of Michigan football team to have this many players on this much NIL money. We're giving our quarterback $7 million. I got that all sorted out with our powerful, influential, successful alumni base. I'm not taking a single dime of it away from the university's academic needs or endowment, but I have figured this out. And now you're telling me that all that work was for naught because you don't like it. And the person at the CSC is going, well, yeah, it was a rules violation, because the spirit of NIL, the whole point here was that players could be compensated for the work that they have done for your university. And you're talking about a 17-year-old freshman who hasn't even practiced with you yet. Not an early enrollment, not even on campus. Why are you paying this person? We are not going to clear those funds. And so you've got, in my opinion, you've got these 2 opposing forces. One that is quite literally a paper tiger in the College Sports Commission that is more in the right of what this was all supposed to be. And then you've got the other very heavy, very powerful influence of especially Big Ten, SEC, but make no mistake, the Big 12 and the ACC also are questioning the authority of the College Sports Commission. And all those people are saying, why should I listen to you just because you were handed authority by an NCAA that, by the way, screwed this thing up in the first place? The reality of the situation is I am watching my university either be massively successful because of the way we're doing it, or I'm watching my university losing ground to those massively successful universities. And now you're telling me I'm going to lose a little bit more ground because I can't give this starting quarterback what we promised him? The College Sports Commission will last probably till the end of this year. And maybe they'll try to rebrand and they'll rename and they'll maybe retool. But we've got, if things keep going the way they're going, we've got 6.5 months of any kind of watchdoggery over NIL deals. It's thinly veiled pay for play. It was always going to be that. It became that instantaneously. It has continued to be that. And just because Nebraska won a court case, or excuse me, the CSC won a court case against Nebraska, does not mean it's going to change. Because right now, the big boys are saying, it might be time. It might be time to break away. And as soon as USC says yes, Oregon says yes, Ohio State says yes, Alabama says yes, Georgia says yes, everybody else just has to follow. There's no other option. The same way when the Pac-12 disbanded. We all watched it. We know what it looks like. It's going to happen again. with this CSC conflict. Thanks for the good news, Ross Dellinger. I say that facetiously. He's doing what he's supposed to do. It's good work. It's a great article. You should go read it. sports.yahoo.com/collegefootball.
I think you can argue Ross doing what he's supposed to do. The CSC is doing what they're supposed to do. I'm not sure you can make that argument for the other guys. Like I know that they feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do, pushing back on boundaries and stuff that they don't feel is necessary. But it's just too bad that we all can't agree that some kind of enforcement for NIL being endorsements, which is what name, image, and likeness means. That is that we can't all agree that that's necessary. And I know that the CSC, for an extension of the NCAA, has had some. I know that we all feel like they've made some terrible decisions, but trying to enforce this, we should not be thinking that's one of them, in my opinion.
By the way, I'm sure Brett Yormark saw this and was like, wait, 75% of that $250 million is coming from the people that we're chasing? You got to find a way. You got to find a way to close the gap. And the only reasonable way right now that you could close the gap as a member institution of the Big 12 or of the ACC, the only realistic way you could close the gap, especially with the CSC potentially throwing a stick in the spokes, is getting an invite to the Big 10 or the SEC or whatever they become when they break away. That's the only realistic option right now. Yikes. All right, got to take a break. Thanks for indulging me. We'll talk about that a little bit more at noon. Sean O'Connell Show continues with Gordy Chiesa next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in Gordy Chiesa, our resident NBA guru. By the way, Western Conference Finals Game 1 tonight, Thunder versus Spurs, 6 p.m. tip, right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Gordy, welcome. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing well. Thank you.
All right, let's handicap Thunder Spurs as a series, as a Game 1. I know you'll be watching with great interest, like all of us will. Set up what you think are the keys in this matchup.
One, rebounding. Here's the question philosophically. Can the Spurs, led by Victor Wembanyama and Luke Cornett, when he subs in a game, out-rebound Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, Lou Dort? So the rebounding will be absolutely critical. And the next part of it, for both teams, who can play defense without excessively fouling? Now, we know Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the best guy in the NBA in the present tense of drawing fouls. So can the Spurs defensive players, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Dylan Harper, can they guard Shai and also A.J. Mitchell without dramatically fouling? Later on, when the ultra-talented off the bench, they bring in their second unit, the Thunder, with Jeremy Kane, who's played tremendous, Cason Wallace, all the guys, Isaiah Joe, Alex Caruso. They're all going to try to create fouls, both on offense and defense. So you've got to play defense without fouling and rebounding in traffic, where it's a law of the jungle in the lane.
The perceived snub by Victor Wembanyama. He did not win the MVP. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, back-to-back. Does it factor in at all when we actually start playing these games?
No, not at all. Absolutely. Now, once the game starts, there's no factor at all, and that Shai is well-deserving, and Victor will get his chance very shortly, and so is Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets. Those are three in the voting. 1, Shai, 2, the Joker, and 3, Wembanyama. This is more than one individual. This transcends any one person. It's going to the NBA Finals. The winner of this series gets a chance to go to the Finals. So it's absolutely, and as always, can the Thunder, can they repeat for the first time, and since the Golden State Warriors did it, and can philosophically, the Spurs, the model franchise, they're playing in their first Western Conference Finals since 2017, 9 years ago. So there's so many different storylines from this franchise point of view, but more importantly, the players. And a little side note, Jalen Williams, who's an all-NBA player, who's hurt most of the year, he played in the playoffs to start the playoffs. He had a grade 1 left hamstring strain, hasn't played since April 22nd. He will play tonight. Probably not start him because A.J. Mitchell has played great for the Thunder. The second-round pick, number 38 in 2024, Sean, out of UC Santa Barbara Gauchos, that draft pick helped them so much without Jalen Williams being there, and he'll come off the bench for them, and that's how talented the Thunder are as far as the 1 through 10.
You just mentioned how long it's been since the Spurs have been to this juncture. Well, they're also such a young team that most of their guys weren't in the NBA the last time the Spurs were this deep into a playoff. How much does the Thunder's experience, they were just here last year, how much does that help the Thunder?
Very much. There's nothing like experience in any profession. Now, with that said, you have to go through it to be experienced. So it's that funny fine line that people have. And they're usually speaking is that everyone learns from their past experiences, whether it's negative or positive. If it's positive, you validate what you know already. And if it's negative, I'm going to learn from this. So the Thunder have that reference point. And remember, last year the Thunder, they were world champions. They had a juggernaut finals where they were able to knock out the Pacers. We know about Halliburton being hurt in game 7, 4 games to 3. And so even when they were champions, it's still fragile. And so the Spurs just have to really try to focus and don't worry about the big picture. Worry about the next possession in front of you. It's so critical to play forward, not backwards. And we see it all the time with younger players and with young playoff teams. Even though they have enthusiasm, they have talent, they play hard, but at that moment of where it's a moment of they got to dig in, they commit a foul or they switch ill-advised or they miss free throws, which are absolutely critical. So the advantage will be the Thunder. Now, in game one, there's also a thing called, Sean, nerves. It sounds weird saying it, but both teams are nervous. As well as these guys are playing playoff games, there's a thing called anxiety. So I always say that. You've got to take a deep breath. Just try to visualize in your mind you playing well and just go on that court and be the best version of yourself, but keep your mind and body and spirit all in the same place.
Gordy, what does Minnesota need to do now that, it was back-to-back Western Conference Finals, didn't quite make it that far this year? It seemed kind of stark the way that last game in the series got away from them to the point where they weren't even playing the starters all the way to the end. And, Ant-Man took a time during a timeout to go congratulate the Spurs. It was just like, I don't know, it felt odd, but what do the Minnesota Timberwolves need to do moving forward? Because being good is awesome. It's not good enough to win you an NBA championship.
Yeah, they have to get younger, and they've got to get more overall shooting. And so Julius Randle struggled the whole, basically, playoffs. And so they've got to either move him or try to keep counseling him that he's got to play better and move the ball. And so they've got to also fast-track this kid named Jalen Clark, who's off the bench guy from UCLA. He's got talent, so they've got to play him more. Remember now, they're playing without Dante DiVincenzo, who's an emotional leader for them, and he hasn't been there. Mike Conley, we love him to death. He said he wants to play next year to be his 20th season. If I'm the T-Wolves, I'm making him a quasi-assistant coach, but now I'm moving on from Mike Conley, and I'm changing their roster to get younger guys and guys that can shoot better. So that's what I would do with them.
All right, let's Gordy Chiesa, by the way, for another couple of minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Let's shift focus to the Eastern Conference Final, which, of course, Game 1 tomorrow night. Donovan Mitchell playing in his first conference finals series. He's helped drag the Cavaliers team. Maybe he's the perfect teammate for a James Harden to actually deliver on what has been an incredible career. But the Knicks have been red hot. They've also been sitting around for a few days. Is that going to help or hurt New York?
It helps New York. Even though sitting around, as far as the rhythm of playing, OG Anunoby, a tremendous player, he's out with the injury. Now he's healed with a hamstring strain. It's so interesting. I keep talking about hamstring strains, and these guys are world-class athletes with the best doctors in the world around them also, and trainers, and they're pulling their hamstrings, which shows you about the effort of what it takes to be successful. Even though you're a fine-tuned machine, it's that quick burst, stop and go, where you compromise your lower part of your body. And I find it fascinating that there's so many hamstrings, even though the technology is magnificent. He's healthy. He helps them tremendously, the Knickerbockers. And, getting back to Donovan Mitchell, former jazz performer, is that this is his first time in a 9-year career, which has really been magnificent, he's ever been in a conference finals. So that's how hard it is, Sean, to do that. And so Donovan's going back to his hometown, New York area. We went to school, as far as high school, Westchester County, and now he's playing in Madison Square Garden. It's going to be one for the ages. He plays in harmony with James Harden. Harden, we know, is an absolutely tremendous player. He can pass the ball. He makes timely shots. Defensively, he's a liability, but they play in harmony. Last point about that. Let's not forget that there's a player from Utah is playing in the conference finals, Sam Merrill.
How about Sam Merrill in Game 7? I mean,
absolutely
23
correct.
Points, 7 of 10 from the field, 5 of 8 from three-point land, hit all of his free throws. The best bench player in the game for either team. Just an unbelievable effort from the former Aggie.
very much, and also the former Brownsville High School player. And so and also add to that, Sean, he was the 60th pick in the draft. We call it the COVID-19 draft of 2020. That's when the draft was in October. It was, such a weird existence for all of us in society. And the NBA draft was late in the fall, and Sam Merrill was the last person picked at number 60. Thus, Sean, when you and I on radio again during the draft, we'll keep mentioning that about it. Some guys are undrafted. This guy was picked number 60. Let's fast forward it. Last night, he earned his keep as far as performance. He knocked out the Pistons' 31-point rout, and he's a big factor in that. So Knickerbockers, they know that James Harden penetrates and Donovan penetrates in the lane to kick it out. They've got to either stay at home on Sam Merrill type people or close out to him and make him a doubt driver. And these are all things, these little nuances of defense of who you're guarding. It's absolutely critical to know the scouting report and to execute it.
All right, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing with the Eastern Conference Finals that I did with the Western Conference Finals. Game 1, what's the key for Cleveland? I hope people here in Salt Lake are rooting for Donovan Mitchell to emerge in this series. I don't know how many people bear any animosity towards him. I'd like to see him be successful here. If Cleveland is going to be successful against New York, what's it going to take?
They've got to take away Jalen Brunson's brilliance. So Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, they've got to dig in. And how you guard Jalen Brunson, he's almost like a 6'2" post player. I'll call him like a footwork dancer. Yeah, he makes threes off the dribble, but his game is based on, he's always in the paint. He's like Sean, he's like a guy, you and I, we went out to the YMCA, and you and I were playing pickup games, and it was you and I on the same team, and we chose a guy that had a torn off shorts, Sean, that said also on it, Brighton Beach, Brooklyn on the top of his jersey to be on a 3-on-3 team, like a pickup game. That's Jalen Brunson. As far as in the lane, old school, slow-mo, you don't show what he's doing, but he's really crafty. So Donovan Mitchell's got to be able to guard him or James Harden as far as physicality. And it's the ultimate, Sean, number on number, where you can't be the second jumper against Jalen Brunson, not on perimeter, but in the lane. And so how you slow down Jalen Brunson, for the Cavs' point of view, Mikal Bridges is playing tremendous. Josh Hart rebounding. So Josh Hart's one of the best rebounders in the NBA for a 6'5" guy that's rugged. He's traffic. He's always involved in it, and they've got to be able to go bang with him inside. And then the last point, Karl Anthony Towns. When the Knickerbockers found that secret success for them, the last half of the season in the playoffs, they played a lot through Karl Anthony Towns on perimeter. And so they've got to continue that, which means now Jared Allen's going to have to guard him. Also, Evan Mobley. They've got to take away some of his easy catches out on perimeter, and they've got to be able to challenge him on the three-point line and also get up in his passes. So we call that body on body, big on big. The worst you do ever against Karl Anthony Towns is play switch defense. He's going to pick you apart, either passes or shoot over the top of them. So keep big on big, either inside or outside.
Gordy, I should have asked you this when we were talking about Oklahoma City, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, back-to-back MVPs, and he bought all of his teammates little gift packages that included a $40,000 watch for each person, like a $3,000 trench coat. I don't know why they all want to look like Inspector Gadget, but that's a thing, I guess. Is this normal? Is this what every MVP does in the NBA? How long has this been happening?
No, very rarely. It's not really normal, and it's commendable that he recognizes that his teammates are truly his floor mates, and that's why they're successful. When you're really an MVP-type talent and a leader of your franchise, is that your teammates really are happy for your success, and likewise, the star players happy for the other people's success, and that's why it works, and that equals chemistry. And Sean, we see it in the NFL a lot of times where the quarterback gives the O-lineman whatever they want because he knows that without them blocking, especially left tackle, they're going to take his head off in a game. So it's often a lot of times elite quarterbacks give the linemen a lot of besides kudos and praise when it's happening, but off season any awards they pay a lot. They give gifts out, thanking them for their performance to hang in there.
Gordy, I'm going to ask you this every day until we figure out where's Giannis going to end up.
Yeah. Okay. Miami, possibly Miami. It makes the most sense because they're borderline playoffs, not playoffs, but they can fit them into it as far as make a few trades. It might be a three-way deal, but it could be Miami, could be. And Pat Riley is right now is 80 years young, and he said all the time that for them in the Heat franchise, there's no rebuilding. They're going to try to be the best they can every single year. Now, it hasn't worked out totally, but they are competitive, though. So it could be, I would say it could be possibly the Heat. Now, we'll know more of that as the weeks go on before the draft. And that's when the week of the draft, it really heats up as far as serious discussion about either trading draft slots and trading players with draft slots. So we'll know that right now. And in Jazz basketball, we know, Sean, that the second pick of the draft is going to be such an interesting thing. It should be, Sean, either I know you're going to have the play-by-play man from the Kansas Jayhawks. So it should be either. It really should be Darren Peterson, the 6'5" two guard that can really shoot. He's tremendous. Or Cameron Boozer, who's a tremendous talent. And we'll know more about if it's Boozer at number 2 if the Jazz seriously try to move on Larry Markkinen, which could happen also before the draft or maybe during the draft or during free agency as far as he's already under contract, trying to move him as far as other teams. We'll see. Should be interesting.
You think that's you think that's a possibility for the Jazz?
Possibility, absolutely. Again, Sean, I'm just saying if the Jazz do draft Boozer, hypothetically, you don't pick the second pick of the draft and not start him. There's no way. I'm using it just a narrative right now. I'm not being more speculative because he's a tremendous player. When I study Cameron Boozer, my notes right in front of me here, he reminds me of really tremendous players. Paolo Banchero. He reminds me of Alfaron Şengün of the Rockets. He reminds me of a younger version of Kevin Love. Pardon me, Kevin Love when he was with the T-Wolves when he was 25, 26 years old. You know, Boozer shot from three-point range this year in college threes, 39.1%, 55% from the field. I just described younger version of Kevin Love, the way he plays outside. And lastly, he plays like his dad, which is really I had the privilege to coach him, and that's good. Boozer can make plays. He's almost like a point center.
Does he rebound like young Kevin Love used to?
He averaged in college rebounds 10.2, but it's like Kevin Love. It's below the rim. Yep. It's not really sweeping rebounds. It's more box out fundamentals. He's a tremendous player, and so is Darren Peterson. They're both different. One is like Ray Allen, catch and shoot in your face, Devin Booker type, catch and shoot, Rip Hamilton, Stephen Castle as far as his talent level. The other guy is an all-around player. I'm excited for Jazz. Sure, you want my quick list of the day?
Yes, I was about to get to the list.
Here we go, quickly. Utah Jazz theme today. Utah Jazz career leaders in most playoff games of scoring 30-plus points or more in a game. It's a quick list. So in Jazz basketball, that's the Jazz goal right now, someday to play in the playoffs. Here we go. How many Jazz players have had 30-plus points in a game? With one all-time, Ricky Green, Jeff Malone, and Bojan Bogdanovic. With 2 30-plus games, John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek. With 3, Gordon Hayward and Thurl Bailey. With 6, Darren Williams and right on point, Carlos Boozer with 6 30-plus games. With 19, Sean, right on point, Donovan Mitchell with 19. And the number 1 player in Jazz history for the most ever 30-point playoff games is Karl Malone with 53. Future, how about someday Ace Bailey? How about someday Keontae George? How about someday the second pick of the draft?
Let's go, Gordy. I want that.
Yeah, no, it could. Again, it could happen. John, think about trying to score 30 points in a game, a playoff game. How hard it is. Everyone's trying to stop you. Everyone's trying to be with you physical. Everyone's trying to get into your grill. Besides talent, you need the mental focus, and you need that unbelievable yourself. The best way to score in a playoff game is to be offensive, physical, and wearing a Brighton Beach T-shirt on our team, wearing a headband.
Little white men can't jump. That'd be good. Gordy,
could be, yeah, it could be.
Always appreciate your time, sir. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sean. Peace out.
All right, we'll have Gordy again on Wednesday. We'll have a couple of games already in the books when that happens. One Western Conference Finals game, that, of course, is tonight right here on the station, ESPN 792 FM. And we'll have another one on Tuesday night. That's the Eastern Conference Finals. We're also giving away a round of golf today. The Festival of Tees is still on, powered by the Utah Golf Association, and brought to you by Mountain Home Services. Toward the end of the show today, we'll have a free round of golf at Sun Hills. I'll tell you more about Sun Hills as the show progresses. We'll tell you what happened in the PGA Championship this past weekend when we get to the Daily Dump. We're going to double it up here when we come back. We had a sporting event live on Netflix this last weekend. It was hyped up. It was a big deal. It was a little bit more spectacle than it was sport at the end of the day, and I'll tell you why. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, 877-353-0700. Indulge me here for a second. Did you watch any of the Netflix fights on Saturday night? Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano headlining. Francis Ngannou, the former UFC heavyweight champion, the former PFL champion. He fought a guy named Felipe Lins, who is actually a light heavyweight. And I thought for sure Felipe, who I know, he fought for the PFL the same year that I won my championship for the PFL. He actually won the heavyweight championship in the PFL that year. Then he went to the UFC and he became a light heavyweight. And he left the UFC on a 4-fight win streak, which is very rare. And I thought, man, if he left the UFC on a big win streak, he must have been getting a lot of money from MVP Promotions. To fight Francis Ngannou, the hardest hitting man in the history of the sport, he must be getting paid like at least $1 million. We're watching. I asked my wife, hey, how much would they have to offer me if you'd tell me, like, all right, you can go fight Francis Ngannou? And she was like, I don't know, at least $1 million. I'm like, yeah, at least $1 million, probably $2 million, because he's got the kind of power in his hands that'll change your life if you take the wrong punch.
And then you made some calls, right? Hey, I'll do it for $1 million.
I'll do it for $1 million. And they were like,
I got the permission.
They're like,
we're
no. Anyway, they found, a decent card to put together. Nick Diaz versus Mike Perry. Mike Perry's done a great job, for any of you MMA fans out there, carving out a nice career for himself post-UFC. Most guys, they leave the UFC and they either retire shortly after that, or they kind of they're put out to pasture in a smaller organization, a lesser organization. And Mike Perry's done bare-knuckle boxing and become their biggest star. He's gotten himself a ton of big paydays. He's done really well for himself. And he won the fight the other night. Very bloody fight the other night. There was a guy that he's the top prospect in France that everyone kind of scratches his head. We tried to get him in the PFL. He wouldn't sign with us. The UFC tried to get him. He wouldn't sign with the UFC. And he fought on this card and looked incredible on this card. But it was all building towards this like main event that it was 100%, as we talked about last week, is built on nostalgia. Okay? It was built on how great Ronda Rousey once was, and it was built on Gina Carano, her opponent, being a massive pioneer in women's MMA. The first ever women's main event on a nationally televised MMA show was Gina Carano versus Chris Cyborg. And Cyborg, by the way, has continued to fight. She's still active. She's in her 40s now, and she has never stopped being a competitor. Gina Carano stopped for 17 years. She was an actor in Star Wars in The Mandalorian. She did a bunch of Hollywood stuff. Ronda Rousey called her, said, hey, I want to do this fight. Gina said, give me a year to get in shape and we can do it. A lot of the articles and everything, the interviews that she did, she acknowledged, she's like, it was hard for me to admit this, but I had to lose 100 pounds in order to get back into fighting weight. She had been in a legal battle with the Disney Corporation. I mean, big emotional thing. So anyway, they're on Netflix, ladies and gentlemen. This is the #1 viewing platform in the world. This is a massive live sporting event, kind of like when they did the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson thing, and it's just build up, build up, build up. The undercard fights were better than the main event in both cases. And the main event, James, did you watch any of it? Did you?
I did not.
Okay.
I was going to tune into some, like I had planned on it, but ended up not tuning in.
And by the way, Netflix was like, I mean, when you brought up Netflix, boom.
Yeah, it was the very first thing.
It was the first thing. It was like you couldn't avoid it. And apparently it's done a massive number. Like, they haven't given the official number yet. Apparently it's done a really big number. And all these people in the MMA world are like, oh, is this a legitimate contender with the UFC now? Is this something that And the answer is no, because there's no intention for MVP Promotions to be an actual contender against the UFC. They don't have the same business model, but we're not going to get into the weeds on that.
It's not a circuit they're starting here. They had one show.
They had one event.
And maybe that's what this will turn into at some point, but that's ridiculous to be asking that question right now.
And by the way, if you like the casual fan that watch, there's a lot of people that are not MMA people. It's one of the worst things about when something gets more attention, is an outlier attention-wise. You know, it was one of the worst things about Conor McGregor becoming such a big deal and being like front page on SportsCenter and front page in Sports Illustrated. Because what do they do when there's an outlier in anything, MMA, gymnastics, Caitlin Clark? There was the Caitlin Clark tax, right? Where all of a sudden people who don't actually know anything about what they're watching have to form strong opinions about what they're watching. We had that again on Saturday because it was a huge conversation point. It's Ronda Rousey's back. And then it was a 17-second fight. Gina Carano did exactly nothing. Now, it was a classic striker versus grappler matchup, right? Gina needed to punch and kick and keep it on the feet. Ronda is a great grappler. Ronda wanted to take her down. Ronda just ran across the cage and tackled her. No takedown defense at all. There was just nothing from Gina. And then Ronda advanced position, armbarred her. It's over. And the problem I had with it was that it was sport and spectacle, especially in combat sports. They go hand in hand, and they're supposed to go hand in hand. But when we have like a Super Bowl, which is sport and spectacle, there's a deep meaning behind the actual winner of the fight, right? The conversation is like, now you are a champion. This now means something. And like the Olympics are sport and spectacle. Some of the things that are a lot less serious than that, right? Like the Savannah Bananas are sport and spectacle. This one, people treated like, oh, Ronda Rousey is back. And I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's manufactured.
Guys, what are we doing? This was somebody who hadn't fought in 17 years, is 43 years old, and I think, and I don't begrudge her this at all, I think was very much using this opportunity with Ronda Rousey, with MVP Promotions. I think for Gina Carano, who, by the way, as soon as she lost, had a massive smile on her face, hugged Ronda. You're not a serious competitor. If you just got embarrassed that way and you're smiling and hugging immediately. Now, by all means, show sportsmanship after it sinks in, after the fact, whatever. It was immediate. It was like, I wasn't here to win. Wow, that went a lot faster than I thought. Had a good laugh, had a big smile. We found out in the disclosed salaries, got paid $1 million for it. 17 years off, 17 seconds of competition. Threw no punches, landed no punches, threw no kicks, landed no kicks, got armbarred, $1.05 million. Big smile on the face. Why not? I 100% believe that for Gina Carano, what this was about was getting back into shape, getting back into where she felt good about herself, getting back into where, and it sounds misogynistic, I don't mean, getting back to where her appearance makes her more screen friendly and she can get back into the film stuff that she was pretty successful in for a while. I think this fight was a vehicle for all those things for her. And so for that, it served its purpose, and I'm happy for her that it did, because she's 43. And like, if somebody called me today and was just like, hey, you want a like low risk, low impact $1 million fight, I'd probably be like, yeah, sure. Like, but I don't know if I could be an unserious competitor through it. The thing that bothered me about the whole deal was that there was no clear decision on what MVP Promotions and what Netflix wanted to do as soon as this was done, right? It was just like, okay, now what's next? Are you going to do it again? Is this the only one you're ever going to do? Is Rhonda ever going to fight again? Is Gina ever going to fight again? Is Francis ever going to fight again for you? It was exactly what Netflix paid for, and it was exactly what MVP Promotions wanted it to be, but the messaging was not present on the broadcast. Like, guys, just so you know, this is like something that you get to watch. We're going to do this one and then maybe never another one. And then even, well, what about if we do it again in 6 months? What about if we do this quarterly? What if we have four of these per year? Nobody knows. And yet, and still, it was treated like this is the return of an all-time great. Ronda Rousey is back. And Ronda was just like, no, I'm going to go have another baby. I'm done.
And she's back for one fight.
She's back for 17 seconds.
Yeah, that's not really a return. That's just I'm doing this one gig because you guys paid me handsomely for it.
So, look, my perception of the event is obviously very deeply influenced by the fact that I am invested with time and blood, sweat, and tears in the PFL trying to be successful. And this event, I'm jealous. This event got more attention than any event that we've ever done. Not because the fighters were better. We had the same fighters. Not because the fights were better. Our fights are significantly better. These were squash matches that were designed to get the red card fighter a big win. Netflix it just attaches itself to this in particular and legitimizes it in a false way where it's just like, yeah, see, this was the best MMA event we've ever had. This is probably going to be the most watched MMA event that's ever happened when Netflix releases the numbers. This is probably going to be the best viewership that any MMA event has ever had. Right now, that number is 9 million viewers on like a big-time UFC card, big-time UFC championship card. And maybe there'll be more than 9 million when they do the White House card that's coming up this summer. Probably not, but maybe. So this one's probably going to go down as that's the most watched event in the history of a sport that, whether you like it or not, or you like me talking about it or not, it's very important to me. We've had some great athletes locally here. It's given opportunities to a lot of Utahns. We've had great fights here in Utah. It is part of our sporting landscape, although a small part of our sporting landscape. And this is going to be, in the pop culture lexicon, in the sports trivia, the most watched fight event ever is a crap fight.
It's like, would you say that it just from how you described it? Again, I didn't tune in. From how you described it, it almost sounds like it's not pro wrestling where it was completely fake, but it wasn't. It was probably closer to that than it was real MMA. At least the main card.
It's a little unfair. Like, okay, so what it is it was deliberately unfair matchmaking.
Okay.
To produce the outcomes that the company wanted.
I see.
Which is, again, that's like the UFC does it too. The PFL does it too on a lower level.
It's not like every match, though. This seems like it's every match was.
This was every match. Yeah. This was every match, except for the Mike Perry, Nick Diaz match. You could make an argument that they were, it's a win-win no matter who wins that one because both of them have big cult followings or whatever. But this was very much designed to be what it ended up being. And in that regard, it was massively successful for Netflix. And it was massively successful for Jake Paul, for Nikisa Badarian, his business partner, for MVP Promotions. That's what their company is called. And if you're a sports fan, right, you're looking at it, you're just being like, well, it's kind of like, you know what the equivalent is, James? It's not the WWE. That's too dismissive of even the losing fighters. What it is, though, it was University of Utah versus Utah Tech.
Okay. It was
the University of Utah
FBS versus FCS.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it was the University of Utah versus Southern Utah. Now, Southern Utah knows how to play football, right? It's when BYU brings in Weber State for the pay game. It was exactly that, where we know what the outcome is supposed to be. We know that they're both playing the same sport. They both have the same skill set, but this person is 10 years older, and so they're probably not going to win. Or this person is 50 pounds lighter, and they're in a heavyweight fight, and so they're probably not going to win. This person hasn't fought in 17 years and hasn't been training for 17 years. This person fought still a long time ago, still fought 9 years ago, but has been stayed in the sphere of the sport and is still trained. That is the best analogy. I'm glad you asked the question that forced me to have the analogy. But now imagine, and maybe you'll understand my kind of angst over this. Now imagine if you're trying to convince just like the casual fan, the casual non-fan, like, I like sports, we're going to put rugby on Netflix, okay? We're going to put college football on Netflix. What should our showcase event be? What should be the thing that introduces this sport on our platform? It's going to be Alabama versus the Citadel. Every college football fan would be like, what are you doing? No.
Let's be serious about this, Netflix. Yeah.
Give us either great sport or give us great spectacle. Better yet, give us both. Don't give us that. Don't. You want to showcase the University of Utah on Netflix? You want to show Morgan Scalley's program on Netflix, the largest viewing platform, the most ubiquitous viewing platform in the world? You can accidentally fall into 1 million viewers. Let's showcase Utah football. Oh my gosh, please. Yes, thank you. Can we? I'll do the broadcast for free. Let's go. All right. Just so you know, it's going to be Utah Tech as the opponent. You're like, no. That's not the one.
No, that's not the matchup. By the way, I'm insulted on behalf of Trailblazer Nation.
I don't.
So
I don't mean any offense, Trailblazer Nation. But the thing is, though, if that happened, James, the reaction from the media, the reaction from the people who know the sport and cover the sport would be entirely appropriate.
Absolutely.
Would just be like, we didn't really learn anything about either of these teams. So, thanks for doing that, I guess. It's cool that you got a bunch of viewers, but it didn't move the sport forward. It didn't. And everybody in the world, in the MMA world, is acting like what happened on Saturday night is a game changer that's going to threaten the UFC's dominance, and is like, oh, man, Dana White's shaking in his boots. And look, to be fair, Dana White waited until Francis Ngannou, who he has a particular beef with, he waited until Francis Ngannou's fight was about to start, and then Dana White went on Instagram Live and announced the return of Conor McGregor this summer to the UFC. So clearly he was like, they're getting too much attention. Let me steal a little attention back for the UFC with this announcement. He doesn't do that if he's just dismissing MVP promotions, just dismissing the Ronda Rousey card.
He probably doesn't do it based on what you just said if it wasn't Francis Ngannou
he probably
on the card
it's
either,
not
right?
Francis Ngannou. They've done that with us in the PFL when we have a good thing going, when we have a good fight card one weekend and they don't. They'll wait until our fight card, our main card starts, and then they put out an announcement of like, oh, hey, this huge fight's happening.
The White House fight's going on.
And we're just like, gosh, dang it, because, of course, they get a ton of attention. So, I don't know. It was, look, I watched the whole card, and it went the way I thought it was going to go, and I was happy to see these people get big paydays in some cases because it's good for fighters to have options. The thing that was insane for me, and I don't even know if the right thing to say is I was mad about it, but the thing that was truly, I felt like I was drinking crazy juice, was watching social media react and being like, Ronda Rousey's back now, baby, and the UFC's shaking in their boots because this got so many views and so many numbers because no one's gonna tune in the next time to watch Ronda Rousey. She already told us she's not serious about it. She took an opponent who was not serious. Like, the PFL might try to co-promote with MVP Promotions because Chris Cyborg fights for us.
I was going to say, if they can, and we've seen it now, multiple events, we've boxing events, and now this MMA event, where they get huge numbers on Netflix. I was going to say, it seems like that would be, if you're able to come together with MVP and PFL, that might be a really good thing for PFL.
Yeah, and honestly, it'd be a good thing for MVP too, because what they do have is they have a deal with Netflix. That's something we want.
Yeah.
What they don't have is a roster of fighters who are actually serious about being MMA fighters for the next 3 to 5 years. Francis Ngannou wants one more fight. Ronda Rousey wants 0 more fights. Gina Carano wasn't even serious about this fight. If we can bring them the fighters and they can bring us Netflix, that's good for everybody, right? Now we're cooking with some gas here. Now that might be something that the UFC actually has to pay a little bit more attention to.
Live view of Dana White when that happens. He's shaking.
But the football equivalent that I just gave you, and by the way, the main event would be like, we're going to have the 2008 Utah football team
Sugar Bowl rematch from
play against, not even Alabama though. It's that team is going to play. The 2008 Utah Sugar Bowl team is going to play against the 1999 Alabama team.
Yeah,
and we're just be like, why are we watching that? I don't know. Thank you for indulging me my 20 minutes to talk about this weird fight card that happened over the weekend. Look, it's good for the attention. What it's not though, it's not good for that to be the example of what MMA on Netflix is supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that you can say it's good for the bringing awareness of the sport if we're going to use that kind of term, but you could probably also simultaneously say that it wasn't a good showcase of the sport. Both things are true, right?
Yeah, well stated. Yeah, yes. And by the way, I think Netflix is going to look at this and be like, maybe we should do more MMA because we got whatever it is, 20 million views on this or 30 million views on this. I can't wait to see what the real number is. Netflix is one of the few streaming platforms that you actually can eventually find good numbers with. Disney Plus never gives you their numbers. Amazon very rarely gives the big numbers. I think we'll actually get a real number on what Netflix. Remember, the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight got 60 million concurrent streams.
Yeah, which is insane. I know that Mike Tyson's a huge name, and that I know that there's so many people nostalgic for the early 90s and the late 80s when he was the baddest man alive, right? But it's insane that that many people from that time or other from that age demographic or other ones were like, yeah, I want to watch a 60-year-old man try to walk around a ring and maybe not get killed. That just didn't appeal to me at all.
There was this will be the last thing, then we'll take a break for the Daily Dump. There was one feel good moment. I didn't get the feel goods out of Ronda and Gina hugging and crying together 17 seconds after a 17-second fight. I was just like, stop. That was crap. And if you actually wanted to win, you wouldn't be hugging and crying right now. Francis Ngannou got paid $1.5 million for his fight. His opponent got paid $100,000. They also handed out performance bonuses for the best performance of the night, and it was given to Francis for the knockout. He got a first-round knockout. He said, you know what? I underestimated my opponent. He actually hit me hard a couple of times. He took a lot more damage than I thought he was going to take. So Francis gave his $100,000 bonus to the guy that he just beat, whose entire paycheck for the night was $100,000.
That's awesome.
So he doubled his pay. That was kind of a feel-good moment. That was kind of cool.
Love to see that, yeah.
All right, we'll do the Daily Dump next. There's a lot of things that we can touch on that we need to get to around the sports world. Do not, under any circumstances, shout USA at Rory McIlroy. We learned that this weekend. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Do not chant or shout USA at Rory McIlroy, especially when he's golfing. The PGA Championship at Aronimink this past weekend was wild and woolly and crazy. Aaron Rai ended up winning it. In order to do so, he had to hit a 68.5-foot putt on hole 17, there was a lot of movement on the leaderboard. You know, I'm a golf watching novice, but you'll see it, right? Thursday, a guy leaves with a lead. Friday, he's still close to the lead. Saturday was the previous runner-up that's now in the lead, whatever. The leaderboard stays relatively consistent in a lot of these PGA championships, a lot of these PGA majors. At this particular weekend, there was like, when we talked with Paul Pugmire on Friday, Rory McIlroy was nowhere near the top of the field. He was dying. He was bogeying everything. And then I turned on my television on Saturday. Actually, I turned it on in anticipation of the Netflix event, and I was like, what the heck? Rory McIlroy's back he's in the lead right now? And then, of course, it didn't end up working out that way for him.
Yeah, they call Saturday a moving day on the PGA Tour OC, and that's because that's the day that you typically see if you see anybody, shoot up the leaderboard, it's on Saturday typically. But Saturday of the PGA Championship in Ronamink was like moving day on steroids. Like Justin Rose started out like I think he ended up getting to 2 under, but at one point he was like tied for the lead after starting the day at +3. And you talked about Rory McIlroy. Rye shot up the leaderboard that day, and he ends up winning the whole thing. Like Saturday was insane for movement on the leaderboard, and it showed you why a lot of golfers and a lot of golf analysts like to call Saturday moving day.
Rory did have a fan yell at him, went USA after a shot, and
when he hit a terrible shot that he just had to avoid the bunker. It nicked the edge of the bunker and fell in. He was already frustrated, and yeah, that set him off.
We should do more, like, not every event, all right? Because I understand people want golf to be unique, and golf and tennis are kind of their own thing from a fan etiquette standpoint. We need at least like 4 tournaments a year that have kind of that waste management vibe where the crowd is just unruly and wild. Golf athletes are the only ones that you can't heckle at all.
Like, especially if they're on Team Europe in the Ryder Cup and you chant USA in an event that's nothing near the Ryder Cup.
Other athletes, right? NBA athletes are supposed to perform even when someone's like, you stink, Russell Westbrook. In the NFL, you could go to a Chiefs game and be like, I hate you, Patrick Mahomes. And he still has to play. He could yell at you, but he probably won't because he's used to hearing that, right? You don't want to know what the kind of stuff you hear at fights. Oh, my gosh. But
not safe for radio.
Golfers, you just say USA? Maybe we don't know that. Maybe that guy just has patriotic Tourette's.
It's ridiculous.
We don't know.
Is again another thing that's the most golf thing ever. That's the thing that sets a guy like Rory McIlroy off. The guy's won back-to-back Masters. He's won the career Grand Slam, and yet he can't handle after he had a terrible shot that kind of took him out of contention for the lead. Understandably, you're upset about that. It's weird that chanting USA is what exacerbates that for you. But that's golf.
I got bad news for Urban Meyer. Well, it's not bad news for him. I have bad news about Urban Meyer. He lost his grievance, his case against the Jacksonville Jaguars for his 2021 firing.
Oh yeah, wrongful termination.
He asserted that they had fired him without cause.
Oh, right. Okay.
And if you fire somebody without cause, you have to pay them the entirety of their contract. He was owed $30 million on the contract. But
it is because I hate you.
It was the cause was because Urban Meyer was guilty of conduct detrimental to the Jacksonville Jaguars, including kicking his own kicker. Josh,
he's supposed to do the kicking, Coach, not you.
Josh Lambo alleged that Urban Meyer created a hostile work environment. The team did nothing to stop it. He actually sued the Jaguars over this. He then dismissed his claim, but he has a case still pending against Urban Meyer. So, which, by the way, like, that's kind of funny to me because I suppose you're never supposed to kick. He didn't hurt the guy. You're never supposed to kick anyone. But anyone who thinks you're going to win a case, it would be a very bad precedent for a court to set that football coaches who are mean almost by trade, at least sometimes, even the nice ones are mean sometimes. If you create a precedent that that's a hostile work environment, every single student athlete, every single professional athlete is going to end up having a case to sue their coach. You don't want to put that out there. Can you imagine? I mean, like, if James, who is the program director here, and outside of the 3 hours that we're doing the show where I get to be his boss, not officially, but we pretend. But like, if James comes into the office and he's in a bad mood and we've done a bad show the day before and he just bleep, 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 yelling at me, doing whatever, throwing stuff, making me, I don't know, run around run up to the stairs.
Take a lap
to the top of the building, right? I could probably say that's a hostile work environment because that's not expected in professional radio. However, it would be very typical conversation for a football coach. Like, the behavior of a football coach is unhinged in almost every practice.
Yeah,
at least for a few seconds.
You gotta, and I hope that courts do. They do. You got to take into account what is reasonable for that particular context, right? For a football coach, like you say, what's reasonable behavior for them is obviously not reasonable behavior, like you said, in radio or in almost any other workplace. So the fact that it's unhinged, it should be weighed. It should be weighed. Well, is it unhinged for a football coach though? Right?
Yeah,
I know that makes it harder, but that's really how it should be treated.
And that's probably where he's going to lose that case too, because coaches spitting, screaming, yelling, crying, freaking out, kicking over the Gatorade cooler, all that stuff is considered within the realm of normalcy for a coach. Where he allegedly kicked the guy while he was stretching, I've seen a lot of wild stuff from coaches. Not kicking somebody, not kicking your kicker.
Especially NFL ranks.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild behavior. And I think, to give it another Utah football tie, former Utah football legendary coach, I think that if a court were to look at the Rick Majerus days, they'd probably find, that's unhinged even for a basketball coach.
Well,
You're like, there's
Rick Majerus
things like that.
You definitely could have won a case against Rick Majerus for a hostile work environment.
Yeah.
You definitely could have. But anyway, Urban Meyer will not be paid $30 million by the Jacksonville Jaguars. They fired him for cause because, conduct detrimental to the team. He didn't fly back with the team and then got caught with that lady. He kicked his kicker
at his restaurant, yeah,
and all that stuff. All right, another one. This one we haven't talked to any NHL today. I totally understand when a team doesn't want to talk to the media after a tough loss. Even though I'm a member of the media, I don't really hold it against players or coaches if they're curt, if they're short with the media. Now, if that's the only thing they ever give to the media, like a Bill Belichick, I think you're just being a you-know-what, and that's stupid. But if it's like an understandable scenario, you just got knocked out of the playoffs, all right. Don't come into the locker room to talk to me. Our season's over. I'll see you next week at the locker room cleanout. How about that? I'd be fine. Even as a beat reporter who's then what's my story? My story is these players were so emotional, they were so hurt that they refused to talk to the media, and there's my 500 words or whatever. I don't understand why the Las Vegas Golden Knights decided not to make themselves available to the media after they won their series against the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, they're still playing.
This is very bizarre to me. They're being fined $100,000. John Tortorella is being fined $100,000 and a second-round draft pick.
Yeah, they lose a draft pick for this
because they only and the media is real sensitive. 3 players did, like Mitch Marner spoke to the media. They had 3 guys talk to the media, but they didn't open the dressing room, and Torts didn't talk to the media. So $100,000 fine and losing a second-round draft pick. Again, why didn't you want to talk? You're talking about winning a series. You're talking about moving on to the Western Conference Final. You're talking about what's next against the Colorado Avalanche. And, hey, how you guys overcame some stuff, but you got the win against the Minnesota Wild. I understand media, we can be annoying. Sometimes their conversations and the questions, they're repetitive. They're droll. I don't know if it's a hill I would want to die on as John Tortorella or anyone in that locker room. It's very odd.
Especially because the reason why there's a lot of people that may not realize. I saw a lot of comments that were like, really, we've got, comparing it to the salary cap circumvention investigation the NBA is doing with the Clippers and how we have no resolution for that. And that has no resolution, but something like skipping media availability is a loss of a draft pick. Are you serious? Like, totally different situations. I think it speaks to maybe some ignorance on what is actually in the CBA about coaches and players have to make themselves available to the media. It's in the CBA. There's certain rules around it. Now, you can have the opinion like what you said, OC. Okay, media is being a little too sensitive, but the fact is it's in the constitution of the league that you have to be there. Now, I have never heard of a penalty as severe as losing a draft pick for skipping out on that. That is, and John Tortorella, he's been coaching forever. He had to know that was at stake. It's wild that he decided to make that decision after a win and knowingly put a draft pick at risk.
And he's part of the problem, actually, because Torts, this is like, he's got a $100,000 fine this time. He's been fined $25,000 in the past, $50,000 in the past for bad behavior, for conduct detrimental, so to speak. So the league is like, dude, you feeling really good about yourself. You got the job 8 games before the end of the regular season, and now you got him in the Western Conference Finals. You still have to do what we tell you to do. I do believe also that it should be negotiated into these collective bargaining agreements that you can take, kind of like you have timeouts. You could take media timeouts from the media. You can just be like, you have 2 of them. Give them 2 a season. Give them 4 a season. Just
and
like, guys,
maybe 1 in the playoffs or something.
I'm not talking to you. No. And, you invoke your right of whatever, this is statute 5.7. I don't want to talk to you today. Oh, coach, come on. Nope. I'm opting out today because especially in these leagues where the NHL communication policy is this is an 82-game regular season, and then it's the playoffs, which if you play well enough is another 3 months, basically, right? You have to be available for half an hour after every practice, free skate, and game. That's a lot. That's a lot of media.
Yeah, the media gets plenty of these built-in availabilities. It's true. The game ones are probably seen as more valuable because it's right after a game or right before a game. But still, it's not as if when guys skip that you had no chance to talk to this guy about that particular game, right? And like you won't have a chance to talk to him about it, like you said, before the next practice, before or after the next practice. So it really isn't the end of the world. But the league, like the reason why these punishments are being handed out because it's literally written in. Hey, you have to make yourself available to the media these certain times around games, around practices, whatever. The draft pick is like the harshest. Losing a draft pick is like the harshest penalty I've ever heard of before, though. I'm not sure I'm on board for that kind of a punishment, but that's the reason why. When you say the NBA still hasn't levied punishment on Steve Ballmer, but the NHL's doing this, like, well, because they're two different things, right? This is not the same thing we're talking about here. Two different leagues to at the very least there.
The Preakness Stakes went off this weekend. Could not have been quieter because, there's no momentum to build on with your Kentucky Derby winner not even contending in the race. But it was won by a horse named Napoleon Solo. I was very disappointed to learn that that's not a name combining Napoleon Dynamite and Han Solo.
Oh,
it's actually Napoleon Solo is a character in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Did you know that?
Did not know that. Have not seen The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Haven't watched it myself.
Okay.
Apparently, Henry Cavill, who's awesome, plays in the movie, the more recent version of the movie. Apparently, that's his character, Napoleon Solo. So,
okay.
Who knew?
Yeah, too bad it's not a Napoleon Dynamite Star Wars fan that owns the horse.
If it was a Napoleon Dynamite Star Wars mashup, that immediately becomes my first favorite horse. I've never really had literally a horse in the race. If that were the case, I would.
Yeah, you'd put some money down.
And they just feed the horse tater tots all the time or something to really extend the reference.
Say things. Have the jockeys say things like, "You've never seen a horse do this in less than 12 parsecs."
That'd be so good. And just everyone's confused, like, what is he talking about? What's a parsec? Well, actually, there's a debate on whether it's a measure of time or distance, but here we go. Last thing in the Daily Dump, brought to you by our friends at Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Air. They can take care of your plumbing needs, your heating, your air conditioning, which, by the way, this last weekend, you probably had to use both of. It's chilly today. It was hot last week. You got to make sure all your systems are ready to go. I want this. We just talked about a Star Wars Napoleon Dynamite mashup. I want this to happen desperately. So ESPN's got a list out of the top free agents remaining in the NFL right now. And most of them are guys that are a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, right? And the list also has the best fits for each player, where it makes most sense for them to end up playing this season. One of these players is the perennial All-Pro and Pro Bowler, Bobby Wagner, the former Utah State Aggie, who is going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer whenever his eligibility comes up. He is probably the best linebacker that has ever come out of any school in our state to play in the NFL. He's going to have a case when it's all said and done, depending on how many more years he gets and whether he's on winning teams. There could be a case he's the best college player ever to come out of the state, with all respect to the Merlin Olsons and Larry Wilsons of the world. Eric Weddle, of course, too. Bobby Wagner's fit in the ESPN article is Jacksonville. If he goes to Jacksonville, if Bobby Wagner goes to Jacksonville, you know who he would be playing next to? Devin Lloyd.
Oh.
Devin Lloyd and Bobby Wagner in the same linebacker unit? That's like a dream for anyone who cares about these two schools at least a little bit.
So do the Napoleon Solo thing with it. Is it Lloyd Wagner, or is it because Lloyd could be is a first name too, right? Or is it Bobby Lloyd? Is it like what is their law firm called? They're the Wagner Lloyd law firm. Wagner Lloyd.
That would be sweet to see Bobby Wagner and Devin Lloyd playing
so great
alongside one another.
Can you imagine if one day, Bobby Wagner's still playing? Of course, you get a Bobby Wagner, Devin Lloyd, Fred Warner linebacker room.
That's too much. That's too much.
All three schools in the state that most people are interested in having a linebacker, current linebacker, great in an NFL locker room, same one together. That'd be I think Utah would explode.
By the way, Puka Nakua showed up at the Ronda Rousey Gina Carano fight over the weekend. It was at the Intuit Dome in L.A. And they introduced him. They interviewed him on camera, and they called him Puka Nakua.
Puka Nakua.
It was awesome. The lady's just like, who's Jared Verse? It's like, L.A. Rams here, Jared Verse, Puka Nakua. And you could see he just kind of like smiled. He's like, okay. Probably the first time in a while anyone's mispronounced his name because he's made his name so famous. But I thought everyone would enjoy that.
Just knocking him down a peg a little bit. He's had some things going on. He doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to be like
you don't
worshipped.
Need to gas him up all the time.
Okay?
Sometimes it's good to know that you're not the biggest fish in every pond. And in a random Netflix MMA show, you're just a football guy that they don't know. Well, I mentioned Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Air is important right now because your heating and air both have to be functioning at the moment. Advanced window products can also help out in a time in a season like this one because one day it's going to be too hot in your house if you don't have energy-efficient windows. The next day it's going to be too cold in your house when you don't have energy-efficient windows. And, of course, it's always aggravated if your windows are older. You don't have to live that way. In fact, if you want to save on your energy costs, your energy bill might come down enough that it matches the payment when you finance new windows. They've got plenty of examples of that. They'll pull out the paperwork at Advanced Window Products, and they will show you examples of, hey, yeah, this person got this many windows from us. This was the total cost, and this was their monthly payment. By the way, this is what their power bill came down to from the previous iteration. 801-850-9100. That's how you get a hold of them. Tell them OC sent you. You'll get $2,500 off 10 windows or more. In addition to making your home more energy efficient, because let's be honest, it's not sexy to worry only about the power bill. What they do, though, is they beautify the home. They increase the resale value of your home. Your neighbors start, oh, man, you know what? James Peterson, he made his house look a lot better. We got to step it up. I got to make sure my lawn is mowed. And by the way, there's a lifetime warranty on those windows. The whole life of your home, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, your Advanced Window Products windows are warranted. The best in the business, and they know they're the best in the business. They trust their product. They trust their sales. They trust their installation so much that they will warranty for the life. If there's ever a problem with that window, they will replace it, no questions asked. And it's all handled here in Salt Lake City, so you're not going to get the runaround on the phone of like, no, that was the installer did it wrong, but our manufacturing process was clean. No, it never goes like that because it's all handled in-house. Give them a call at 801-850-9100 and tell them OC sent you. Lots more to get to on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Oh my gosh, James, I'm finding myself $100,000 and a second round draft pick for an egregious error. Brain fart. As many people have correctly pointed out on the text line, Devin Lloyd signed he signed a deal with the Panthers, not the Jaguars. He's no longer with the Jaguars. So that entire rant I just went on was wrong and stupid, and I apologize. And I knew he was with the Panthers. You know how it goes. Panthers and Jaguars.
They're both Wildcats.
I hate when I do that. You cannot imagine how badly I hate when I leave out a simple but, massively important factoid on something like that. And my brain just files away. Yeah, of course, Jaguars. Yes, that makes sense. Instead of being like, no, you have this knowledge already. He's no longer with the Jaguars. I'm sorry to Bobby Wagner. I'm sorry to Devin Lloyd. I'm sorry to all of you who had to listen to that crap 4 or 5 minutes of radio. We'll do better. We'll do better this next 15 or so. At least I hope so. A lot of speculation as we have learned that the Utah Jazz will have the number 2 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And the projections have it either being A.J. DeBonsa or, more likely, Darren Peterson, who, of course, spent his college years at the University of Kansas. I shouldn't say his college years, his college days at the University of Kansas. We wanted to do as much as we could to get information on what he was like at Kansas, what he project well with the Utah Jazz. And so we lean on someone who knows all about it. The voice of the Kansas Jayhawks, Brian Haney's kind enough to give us a few minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Brian, welcome. How are you?
Hey, doing great, Sean. Talking to you from standing on James Naismith Court here in college basketball's greatest venue, just 100 feet away from Naismith's original rules. So I thought I'd set the scene for you on what I'm looking at as we talk about Darren Peterson today.
I actually love that that's where you're at right now. And now is that lost on you at any point where you're walking in hallowed halls whenever you're at work, basically?
Man, it's a blessing to show up every day, and I try not to ever take it for granted. A lot of times I'll come and get my lunch burrito or whatever and sit in section 16 and just look at all the retired jerseys and the rafters and look at the national championship banners and remind you that whether you're having a Final Four type season or not, we get to show up and go to work here at a place where basketball is truly historic and celebrated in the highest of regards. And, the history that's come through this place, from the father of basketball, James Naismith, to the father of basketball coaching, Fog Allen, who coached Dean Smith, who went off to North Carolina, who was a mentor to Adolph Rupp, who went to Kentucky. It all kind of branches out from Kansas. And I don't mean to say that in a braggadocious kind of way. I just think it might be interesting for some of the folks in Salt Lake City to hear about that, because you're well aware of the Greg Ostertags and Jacques Vons and Udokas, the Bukis of the world, the Steve Mikhailuks of the world. But that Kansas history goes all the way back to 1898, and Naismith coming here right after he invented the game in 1891 in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Well, it is really neat that there's that level of history just steeped into a Kansas Jayhawks basketball program, and there's a chance that that vein that extends out probably to every state in the union will have a strong extension here to Salt Lake City after this upcoming NBA draft. There's a lot of projections out there that believe that Darren Peterson will be wearing a Utah Jazz uniform as the number 2 pick if everything stays chalk and kind of how it is. And a question we've been asking for weeks now is, what's he going to be like in the pros? And now that, the Jazz are in a position where they could probably get him, or at least players like him, what's he going to be like potentially in this particular pro system? So I think the best way to answer those questions is to kind of go back to what he was at Kansas. And we watched this because obviously Kansas is in the same conference as Utah, as BYU, the teams we pay most attention to in the Big 12. And Darren was, when available, when ready, he was an incredible basketball player. And then there was all the conversation about, how reliable is that availability? Bill Self seemingly during the season was frustrated. Darren was frustrated. The fan base I know was frustrated. It was probably frustrating for you sometimes. Is that all washed away now, Brian? Is it all figured out with the creatine stuff? Is that all a non-concern as he turns the page and heads into the NBA?
I think for us at Kansas, obviously it's in the rearview mirror. We wish the season would have included a Final Four run. We wish he would have been the first-team All-American that he was hyped to be, but it was a really unusual and unfortunate set of circumstances that put his availability in question so often. But I would tell you, in terms of the young man and being around him on a daily basis and watching everything he was doing in terms of getting his body right and ready to play and being a positive teammate, even on the days when he couldn't be out there with his teammates, I mean, he was a 10 out of 10 for me. And I think a lot of times when you have a guy that comes in with the hype of Darren Peterson, Bill Self saying this is the most talented player we've ever had at Kansas in our 23 years of his tenure here, and that includes Joel Embiid and Andrew Wiggins, who are number 3 and number 1 respectively in that very talented draft over 10 years ago now. That includes other number 1 overall picks from their respective classes in terms of the recruiting rankings. He said with a bullet, Darren Peterson's the best. You had Bill Simmons before the season started saying, this is Kobe Bryant we're looking at here. And so he was just absolutely exalted with more pressure and projections and hype, put on him than any player I've had a chance to cover in my decade as the voice of the Jayhawks. And sadly, over a sustained, 35-game sample size, we weren't able to see that because of the hamstring tweak and the flare-ups that happened in a couple of different spots. And then, there were games like the BYU game that I'm sure were glued to the TV watching, where he dominated in the first half. And there was no question who the most talented player on the floor was over the first 20 minutes. But then all of a sudden he feels that tightness early in the second, and we barely see him after halftime. And so disappointing, right? And if that's truly now been solved with, what they discovered with the extra creatine he'd taken during the preseason workouts, and perhaps that was the trigger for this whole thing, then yeah, you're getting a guy who has a ceiling that is to the moon in terms of his trajectory, and a guy that I think is hands down the highest ceiling player in this draft. But whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever, the old cliche, your best ability is availability. We need to see it obviously hold up for an 82-game schedule in the NBA, and I hope that that's the case for him. I know from a work ethic standpoint and a want-to standpoint, as Roy Williams used to say, the want-to factor, that it was never a matter of him not wanting to be out there. It was never a matter of him wanting to load manage, as some speculated on X and other social platforms. This is a guy who was beloved by his teammates, who busted his tail every day, both in the team practice sessions that he was healthy for and on his own with his own individual trainer, to be the best version of himself he could possibly be. And on top of that, for a superstar with that kind of hype, he was as down-to-earth and even-keeled as any you would expect to see. I mean, this is a guy that on the first day of practice, he's dapping up every manager all the way down to the last freshman that's refilling the Gatorade jug. He's just that kind of guy. He's not somebody that walks in and thinks he's God's gift to basketball and things need to be handed to him. Good work ethic, terrific kid, unfortunate set of circumstances. And I think, honestly, those around him wanted to be really careful with it because you didn't want to see him really get hurt and then be done for the season and have a larger injury cloud hanging over him. So it was a situation where I think that they were just extra precautious, and it was head-scratching and frustrating to all involved because they couldn't get their handle on what the trigger was that was causing him to have this continual tightness and the ability to, or the inability to play with a free mind, that it wasn't going to lock up on him. And then it became a national story after the Oklahoma State game in Stillwater, where he was tearing it up, more than 20 points already, and then hits the three, turns to Bill Self, asked to come out. And then you have talking heads nationally that haven't spent more than 10 minutes watching our program all year, all of a sudden having some kind of insider opinion that was really largely speculation-based. And I think the narrative kind of got out of control at that point. So, sorry, that's a long monologue there, but you can tell I like this kid a lot. And I think a lot of his future, and I think a lot of what was reported mid-season and late season was largely speculation and honestly not truly fair to him at all.
Well, look, I'm glad you just went on a long run because I think Jazz fans want to hear exactly everything that you just said. If they believe it's likely he ends up in Salt Lake City, you want that version of this guy, not what we saw, what we heard, those talking heads. And look, I'll be honest, I would only see those little snippets sometimes and just be like, what's this kid's deal? Why is he asking out of a football or of a not a football of a basketball game? Why that's not what a number one player in the country is supposed to be doing. But of course, there's always context to it. I guess my follow-up question to that is, how did that context get lost when those conversations were happening? You knew they were happening. Kansas, the Bill Self probably knew they were happening, and we didn't hear the stories. He daps up every manager when he comes to practice. He cleans up the locker room. He's this guy. He's not who you think he is. He's not load managing. It felt like maybe the damage control could have been a little bit better, or did I just miss it?
To be clear, I'm not sure I saw him clean up the locker room, but everything else was true there. No, I think the honest answer to that question is he was not featured in front of the media a ton in the first 2 months of the year. And quite frankly, it was maybe twice that he actually was available for a press conference. And part of that is he's a quieter kid that's now starting to come out of his shell a little bit more. And when you see him in interview settings, I think he's really thoughtful and has a lot of interesting things to say. But when he first got here, some of that media, big stage, bright lights and bulbs and flashing camera stuff, it was still, despite all of his hype and heraldedness, a little bit new. And they didn't throw him out there every night to meet with the press. And especially once the injury situation or the hamstring tightness situation started to flare up, he was really unavailable to the media. And could that have been handled differently? Perhaps. And maybe you would have had more, I guess, transparency into what he was like and how much he was still around and how much he was beloved. But I think if folks really want to go back and look at it, look at some of the media comments of his teammates while he was out. And they were all super supportive. And, man, we can't wait to get him back. And he's a big part of who we are, and our ultimate ceiling and potential is still tied to him. It was never like we can't win without him, but it was, hey, we're trying to keep this thing afloat until he gets back because we love Darren and we want him to be a part of this. There was never any kind of divide, which sometimes you see in major conference college basketball or football when there's one ballyhooed and hyped guy who's exalted on a pedestal above the others. His teammates genuinely liked him. It was a difficult thing for everybody because it wasn't just the hamstring tightness. There was a game in which he was like actually very physically sick and was a late scratch right before Arizona. And I think that added to the storyline of, what's going on here? And there was a rolled ankle that he played through at Colorado that then kept him out for about 10 days afterwards that added to it as well. But it was a legitimately pretty significantly rolled ankle that I was impressed he could play through when it happened. So point is, I think that if you ask his teammates and the folks around the program, everybody would have nothing but supportive comments to make. And you didn't hear as many of the anecdotes I gave you about the positive teammate that's dapping up the manager simply because he wasn't out there in front of the media nearly as much until we got to the NCAA tournament, when you have an open locker room and suddenly everybody has access and those questions start to be asked and there's more narratives and perspectives being shared. And that's when I think folks started to figure out a little bit more of what he was made of and what his mindset is on things. But I've got nothing but great things to say about him. Obviously, we'll always wonder what may have been had he had the blessing of full health all season and been able to not have the disruptions and interruptions to rhythm and all that occurred with several start him up and then sit him down type chapters of this season. Because honestly, as I stand underneath these Hall of Fame jerseys at Allen Fieldhouse and I look up at the names from the Self era that have won titles here and at one point won 14 straight Big 12 championships here, he's got the highest ceiling of any of these guys. And quite frankly, Sean, he has the highest ceiling of any name I'm looking at here in the north end of Allen Fieldhouse since Paul Pierce in 1997, who went on to be a 10-time NBA All-Star, NBA Finals MVP, and first ballot Hall of Famer. That's the type of ceiling and potential he has. And as Bill Self said, his words, not mine, this is the highest ceiling, most talented recruit he's had in 23 years. And as you well know, Self, a first ballot Hall of Famer himself, has recruited incredible talent here. Darren has a ceiling as high as any of them.
We're talking with the voice of the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team, Brian Haney's our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. There's a level of insecurity here in Salt Lake City, Utah, when it comes to the NBA, and when it comes to the Jazz place in like the coolness ladder. Do players actually want to be here? If they want to be here, do they want to stay here? There's always questions about that. To be fair, there was a massive amount of conversation prior to last year's draft about how a guy who ended up being drafted by the Jazz, Ace Bailey, did not want to be in Salt Lake City. And it was all nonsense. It was just completely manufactured tomfoolery that made no sense when you really boiled it down, because he came in, he worked hard, he ended up having a great season for the Jazz. He's an important part of their future. With Darren Peterson, with A.J. DeBonsa as well, because people know he likes the state of Utah, with Cam Boozer, who's kind of in this conversation also. His dad works for the organization. He spent time in his childhood here in Salt Lake City. There's like a comfort. There's a sort of like relaxation blanket of like, well, we know these guys and they know us. And because of that, it's going to be a better fit in Salt Lake City. And Darren Peterson is the outlier in those top three because, as far as we know, he doesn't have any connection to this market. He doesn't have any reason to already love Utah or whatever. How important is place, is location, do you think, for somebody like Darren Peterson to be successful? Because fit matters, cultural fit matters, and like I said, there's always a question about whether or not Utah checks the right boxes for some of these young men in the NBA. In your mind, how would he fit in Salt Lake City? How would Salt Lake City fit for him?
Man, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that before, and yet that makes perfect sense why folks would wonder about that. I see Darren as a guy who's, lived and played in Ohio, California, Kansas. He's not one of these flashy guys that needs to be in the largest major metropolitan area with a L.A. or New York type pro future based on endorsement opportunity, whatever. Now, I do think his marketing team and representation want to make sure that he has the chance to be showcased in every possible way. But in NBA basketball nowadays, it doesn't matter what market you play in. Look at Oklahoma City and some of the national opportunities those guys get just based on winning. And that's what Darren cares the most about, is winning. And I don't see him as the type of guy that needs to be out and living the Hollywood lifestyle or out of New York City in terms of the social scene either, because this kid's a grinder who's in the gym constantly, who's working on his craft, and I don't see him as somebody that needs to have the chance to take his talents to South Beach, so to speak. So I think this is a guy that's going to go wherever his name is called, try to make that place a championship caliber organization, and if he feels supported there, hopefully be a Jazz player for life or whoever drafts him for life, because at the end of the day, what drives him is, I think, individual legacy, and the biggest part of that is team success. He is built on being the best player he can possibly be and carving out a name for himself and a legacy that does live up to the hype that guys like Bill Simmons and others have put on him. And he knows the ticket to that is as much winning on the floor as he can possibly do and ring chasing. He didn't get to chase one at Kansas, unfortunately, and we all thought that was a foregone conclusion at the start of the year. But that's going to be ultimately what motivates and drives him as much as anything in his pro career. And so long as he feels supported in that endeavor, I think that's what's more important than some kind of major market or glitz and glam setting, because I just don't see that in his personality type. Again, softer spoken, a little more introverted. He's not some guy that needs to be in the biggest city with the flashiest stage or whatever. He just needs to be in a great organization, and it certainly seems like Utah offers that.
Brian, it's probably an unfair question, but you're the top 5 pick. You're a day one starter. How long until he is in the NBA? An all-star caliber player in your mind?
Man, as I get set to answer that question, I'm thinking back to when the Jazz drafted Udoka Azubuike, and it wasn't your show, Sean, but one of the shows I think on the same station had me on, and I was honest, and I said, I think he could be a good backup center for you, a role player, really athletic shot blocker, run the floor, maybe get you 5 points and 6 boards a game. And the host was so underwhelmed with my response, and I was just being honest. And obviously, Udoka didn't wind up staying there very long, but many times guys drafted at the end of the first round don't. But as you said, this is a program or franchise-altering type talent at the top. And so I'm going to try to give you the honest answer again, and that is that if we see the version of Darren that is not limited in any way, and I don't mean ankle injuries or stomach flu, but, the hamstring tightness, the stuff that didn't allow him to explode and take off and fully turn it up all the way. I mean, Bill Self said on several occasions the explosiveness he showed in his final year of high school or prep ball versus last season at Kansas, he was not at 100%, and you didn't see that like full all out. And it wasn't because he didn't want to bring it, he just was limited. But if there's no limitation there, remember that posterizing dunk he had in the BYU game when he dominated that first half against Debonsa? I mean, that's a guy that could be all-star caliber from day one. If you want a prediction, I'll say he's in his first NBA All-Star game in his second season. And then with the blessing of good health and no major injuries, it's a perennial thing for him. Why not the first season? Well, we got to hedge our bets a little bit. But could he be that? Absolutely. And I think he's what I said earlier about Paul Pierce, that it was a 10-time NBA All-Star. I think you're looking at a franchise-altering talent here that hopefully puts whoever gets him on a completely different trajectory of winning. But in terms of the individual, year in, year out, absolute star. And there are things defensively that we saw him scratch the tip of the iceberg of, but again, you didn't see it full on because he wasn't fully healthy throughout. There are ways he can change the game on both ends of the floor that I think college basketball fans only got to see a glimpse of this year. And once it's a more regular thing, sustained over a larger sample size, I think this might be one of those drafts where the team picking number 2 feels like, holy smokes, we can't go wrong no matter who falls to us. And weren't we so fortunate it worked out the way it did?
I mean, yeah, we're having you on for obvious reason, but it's far from a foregone conclusion that he's even going to be there at number 2 for the Utah Jazz to pick. Do you think that, Washington should be having the serious conversation about him at 1 instead of an A.J. Debonsa, given what they've got on their roster, and how well he could coexist with like a Trae Young? I'm not sure, but I wanted your thoughts on that. I mean, is Washington, D.C. calling you for these same exact conversations?
This is my second Salt Lake City interview. I haven't had any from D.C., but I will tell you this. If Darren had been healthy all year, I don't think it matters what the rest of your roster construct looks like. He's number 1 with a bullet, and that's no disrespect to A.J. Debonsa, who was phenomenal, and I think it's going to be a regular all-star as well. Obviously, I'm biased, but when Bill Self says some of the things he said to me both on air and off about what he thinks Darren's potential is, that really resonates. And I think that, had he had a full season, and the fact that he didn't means that there's a question mark, right? And the fact that Debonsa was much more predictable in terms of his playing time and contributions and did some heroic things that were just jaw-dropping, it means that he's the much safer choice, it would appear, just based on what we've witnessed in the last 6 months. But this would be an interesting conversation to revisit 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because I genuinely believe that Darren's ceiling is not just higher than AJ's, but a couple of floors higher. And that's no disrespect to AJ at all. That's just significant Darren Peterson belief on this end. And who knows, maybe I'll look foolish in 2 or 5 years when we look back on it. But that's the type of player I think he can be, that alpha killer instinct that takes over a game at game point, that has that lift everybody else around him type ability. And AJ certainly has that too. But to me, I just think Darren is a slight notch above. And the history of head-to-heads, there've only been a handful of them, but they've all gone the way of Peterson as well. And, we wish we could have seen a full 40 minutes of them go back and forth when they played here at Allen Fieldhouse back in January. But that first half, honestly, if you wanted a 20-minute slideshow or highlight reel of what his optimal potential looks like, it was that first half because he was turned up. He was opposite AJ. This place was jumping, and he was absolutely incredible. And that rim rock and dunk where he posterized one of the Cougars, that's about as loud as I've heard the field house, and one of the most electrifying moments in the 70-plus year history of this old barn. And I hope that whether it's the Jazz or whoever gets to have him, you get used to those types of plays because, man, this kid is worth the price of admission and then some. And he's the guy, if you're listening with a son or daughter, I'd run out there and buy his jersey tomorrow because, like I said, instant star, and I think he's genuinely a good person too. I just think that a lot of his story was not told this year because he didn't have a lot of in front of the camera media stuff, but he's a hardworking, driven guy that I think will come out of his shell more and more, but the talent will be evident from moment one that he steps inside your organization, and I can't wait to see where that proves to be.
Well, it's great to hear that, whether he ends up being a Jazz man or not, and I think it's actually pretty neat that seems to be the consensus on all the guys near the top of this year's NBA draft, right? You hear really good things about Boozer. You hear really good things about AJ. You hear good things about Caleb Wilson. It's nice. I don't know I know it doesn't matter to a lot of sports fans. I know here in Salt Lake City it still matters more here than maybe in some other places, but like it's nice to be able to root for the person and not just the player.
Totally. And I think that Darren is a classic example of just because he's not super outgoing and doesn't tell you in 6 paragraphs exactly what he thinks doesn't mean he's not exactly the type of guy you'd want to have represent you. I think there are more gregarious, outgoing personalities in this draft class, but to me, what I saw was how did he treat other people and how much did his teammates like him, love him, respect him, even when, you know, it would be easy to be resentful or jealous of the attention he was getting. And they saw how hard he worked both during team practice and on his own on the side, and that's what earns you the respect. And so he's a guy that to me checks all the boxes in that regard. But to your point, man, as a college basketball guy, this class is incredible. I mean, you'll have people taking 7th or 8th that could be franchise-altering type players and potential perennial all-star type players within this same class. And had a chance to see Caleb up close. He may wind up in Chicago with the 4th pick. We played out at Chapel Hill this year, and ironically, that was the first sign of anything wrong with Darren physically. But I was blown away by Caleb Wilson. I thought he was incredible. So anybody in the top 6 or 7 picks, man, you're going to be blessed with an incredible talent. But I would love to pick number 2. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on with you right now, but think about it. All the pressure is off because both those 2 picks look to be incredible legacy-defining type selections. And, you know, the first choice is going to be made for you. And it's kind of like, I'm not saying that one of them is going to wind up to be Greg Oden, but how great was the Seattle Supersonics positioning when they got Kevin Durant?
Yeah.
If the organization in front of them took the 5-star center, you were going to still get an unbelievable generational talent, and that's exactly what they got. And I think Utah's in a very similar spot this year.
That's what we hope for. Brian, appreciate your time. Maybe if it all works out the way I think it's going to work out, maybe we'll have you out here watching your old Kansas Jayhawk play at the Delta Center in a Jazz uniform sooner than later. So,
man, I would love that. Absolutely. And shout out to Steve Mikhailuk in the meantime, who's been out there recently, one of our dear friends. So, yeah, I hope that's the case. And thanks for the platform to come on and talk about DP today, Sean. I really appreciate it.
The voice of Kansas Jayhawks basketball, Brian Haney, kind enough to jump on today. And look, he's not an unbiased observer. This is, he's the voice of the Jayhawks, but he doesn't have to say all those things about the person. Yeah, the player, it's easy. You could be like, oh, man, kid could jump out of the gym's got a great shot, incredible handles, and you can leave out, if it's not true, you just do leave out, well, if they're a turd, you don't say it, but you don't go the opposite direction either. That's encouraging, right? Because we don't know Darren Peterson, and we still don't, but people who do, saying good things about him and expressing a belief that he would be a good fit in Salt Lake City, that he would be a consummate professional in the basketball world, that if he is the pick at number 2, there's absolutely no question he's the right guy to have there. That's nice.
Yeah, I would say, too, especially with how badly it went from a health standpoint, voice of the Jayhawks or not, he did not have to say that these were what he said, which was basically these were kind of one-off crazy freak injuries that happened to him. Some of them not freak injuries. You roll an ankle, you miss 10 days.
That happens, yeah.
But like you pull a hamstring or whatever. But the cramping, he did not have to say that he's not concerned about those things. If anything, you'd expect a guy who's as close to the program like that, the guy's gone, to say that is concerning to me. If it really is something to be, from his perspective, to be really concerned about. So I think that should be that should help Jazz fans feel a lot more optimistic about if they do stay at number 2 and Darren Peterson's the pick. Should feel a lot better about that. Even if I know there's so many people, you included, OC, that really love the idea of AJ DePonsa, you should feel really good about Darren Peterson, especially after that interview.
Good on James Peterson for getting Brian Haney to come on the show today. All right, we'll take a quick one here. I will give you an update on the Brendan Sorsby saga as he battles with the NCAA to try and make sure he's eligible for this year's football season despite his suspension. We'll talk about that next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Oh, Brendan Sorsby, you and your lawyers are in for a heck of a fight. We're giving away some more golf today on the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll do that in about 12 minutes. I'll call it 12 minutes during topical trivia. It's Porter and Tony filling in for Spence today on the drive, by the way, if anyone's interested. So Brendan Sorsby, this is the latest in the saga of the former Cincinnati quarterback, who, of course, has transferred to Texas Tech and is currently, as we speak, he is in an inpatient addiction facility recovering from or getting treatment for and therapy involved with a gambling addiction that was revealed through investigations, and he admitted to thousands of bets on gambling apps. As we've reported every step of this process, he did retain counsel, Jeffrey Kessler and Scott Thompson, to be part of his legal team. There's now actual cases filed against the NCAA and an appeal in Texas Civil Court, Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code, for the NCAA to be precluded from enforcing its gambling bylaws against Mr. Sorsby. Okay, so he's hired lawyers to build a case that this is not him being a rule breaker, that he did not willingly, deliberately, in some might be describing obnoxiously, skirting the rules of gambling on sports, on college sports, on sports involving his own teams, not games that he participated in so far as we know, but they are building a case around mental health, which is where the slope gets so exceedingly slippery for the NCAA to try and defend itself against these cases and, of course, by extension, enforce the suspension of Brendan Sorsby, the projected starter at Texas Tech. Which, by the way, it's important to state, Texas Tech is going to be just fine if Brendan Sorsby doesn't end up starting for them. Will Hammond is a heck of a quarterback. Now, even if it takes 4 weeks to get him back and you've put yourself in a bit behind the eight ball with a couple of non-conference games, maybe you lose one you shouldn't have lost, but they're going to be fine even without Sorsby. This fight is about Sorsby maintaining his eligibility, his access to the reported $5 million of NIL funds that are coming his way from Texas Tech, etc. But his defense is based around this is a mental health condition. He's clinically diagnosed as a gambling addict. This is a mental health problem, not a gambling problem, not a rule-breaking problem, not a problem involving his disrespect of the legal and moral obligations he has as a quarterback in college football to not gamble on college sports. This defense team is setting this thing up. And look, their case, quite frankly, even without that, is compelling from a common sense standpoint. So you're telling me that the NCAA wants to profit off of gambling. They want to partner with these gambling companies. In the games that Brendan Sorsby plays in, you're going to be running ads for the very apps that he's not allowed to have on his phone. And you want him and his classmates and his teammates to be the outliers, but you want everybody else to spend their money on these apps, right? It's hypocritical of these sporting organizations to partner with the very things that they then say you can't use. It's not a lot different than if, I don't know, there was like a legalized anabolic steroid in our country. And you're just like, we'll go to commercial and here's Gatorade Super Testosterone X. And they're advertising that, but then they're just like, by the way, so-and-so got suspended from the game that we just came back to for having Gatorade Super Testosterone X in his bloodstream, right? if the NBA were advertising cocaine and then a player had cocaine in their system and got suspended for it, we'd be like, that's kind of hypocritical, because it is. However, these leagues are allowed to be hypocritical, and the players are not. And now the NCAA is in this very, very tenuous, insane corner where if they let Brendan Sorsby play, or if he wins a case and somebody else, the civil court, determines that Brendan Sorsby is allowed to play, you have now deemed gambling violations unenforceable. You have set precedent. As long as you have a mental health diagnosis, as long as you have a gambling addiction diagnosis. And by the way, why is it only gambling addiction? Well, my client is addicted to marijuana, so he can't be suspended for marijuana. My client is addicted to alcohol, so he can't be suspended from participation in an NCAA game because he got a DUI. It's a mental health condition. He was just medicating himself with these I almost said dating apps, with these gambling apps.
He's medicating with dating apps. That's a new one. Yeah, that's where you lose me, OC, because I'm very sensitive as you ought to be, if not more so, to people with addiction, with mental health conditions. But as sensitive as I am to that, you still have a responsibility to make sure you're following rules, to make sure, especially when we talked about with Tiger Woods too, especially in that case when it's talking about public safety too and your own safety. Gambling is not that, but you're talking about the safety and integrity of the game here. Like whether he has a clinically diagnosed addiction to gambling or not, like he doesn't absolve him from getting the penalties of breaking the rules.
It's also when someone has a mental health condition, it doesn't mean that you just allow them to do whatever the compulsion of that condition. It doesn't mean that's what's best for them, right? Eating disorders are mental health problems. The way that you help someone overcome an eating disorder is by treating them, giving them therapy, helping improve their relationship with food. It's not like, well, yeah, this person is allowed to starve themselves or this person is encouraged to vomit after every meal because they have an eating disorder. We've diagnosed it. Like, he's allowed to gamble or has been allowed to gamble until now because it was a mental health problem. So you can't blame him for it. It's like, well, guys, that's not how we treat substance abuse of any other kind. That's not how you treat alcoholism, alcohol-related violations. I get it. Brendan Sorsby's defense team identified this as a loophole they could try to force open very early in the process. And you know what? I don't mean to be dismissive of gambling addiction if that's something that you've dealt with. I've never encountered it. I have no anecdotal experience with it. Maybe Brendan Sorsby truly is gambling addicted and has nothing, but it doesn't mean he's not responsible for any of the things that happened or any of the consequences of gambling addiction. If he built up a bunch of debt, right? If he broke a bunch of financial rules effectively because of his gambling addiction, do you just get to go to the bank and say, well, I had a gambling addiction, so you can't collect on this credit card that I charged a bunch of stuff to? Sorry. It was a mental health problem. The consequences still exist. And it didn't start out as an addiction either. You placed bets on sports when you weren't supposed to. And actually, in his case, it was when he was underage and it was illegal for him to be betting in the first place.
Yeah, I love the word you use, consequence, right? OC, and we can't use mental health conditions, as serious as they are, addiction, whatever it might be.
It's not a free pass.
Yeah, we can't use that. Does not eliminate consequences of the actions that you have made, because of the addiction or whatever else. There are still negative consequences. There are positive consequences. There are negative consequences. The ones we're talking about here. Like, that's the lesson that you still need to learn. And it feels like, not to make this a whole overarching talk about how society is today, but it does feel like it's pervasive in our world today, way too pervasive that, hey, like, oh, I'm naming this thing that everyone has to be sensitive about, so that means I should not be held accountable at all.
Right. You're 100%
we need to
right,
stop
James. People, and not all people, maybe not even most people, but it's undeniable that some people use the hot button words, the issues of mental health, to get themselves out of a jam sometimes. And it's an abuse of a system, and it's a terrible thing to do, and it's crying wolf, and it is devaluing, and it's really a disservice to people who suffer from real mental health.
The ones who are accepting consequences, accepting accountability, trying to be better. Well, it really is a disservice to
I'm glad we're using the word consequences, because you have to think about the other consequence here, right? The consequence, if the court somehow wins, if the case is somehow settled in the fact that, all right, we're going to let Brendan Sorsby play while we figure this out. The consequence, if you let that happen, is that you've made the rules unenforceable. We've already seen what this looks like with other stuff. We've already seen what this looks like in transfer. We've already seen what this looks like. You cannot set precedents. The lawyers of the world are just waiting. They're sharks. And that little bit of blood that comes out, that's precedent. And then they just attack it, and they're like, aha. If you let
Watch out for that precedent blood floating in the water.
If you let Brendan Sorsby play, and does it matter to me that it's Texas Tech? Honestly, no. If he was still a Cincinnati quarterback, I don't think Cincinnati's going to win the conference. I don't think Cincinnati is a threat to Utah or BYU. Texas Tech certainly is. But if he was at Arizona State, if he was at Arizona, if he was at Oklahoma State, if he was at UCF, and he was like, yeah, I gambled on a bunch of stuff, and I got caught for it. First of all, you know how many thousands of athletes are betting on stuff and not getting caught because they just do it in a more intelligent way? I'm not bothered by them. Brendan Sorsby, you have unfortunately become the poster boy for this, and you cannot weasel your way out of the predicament that you put yourself in by claiming it's a mental health case. He wrote this statement. It's going to be detrimental to my mental health if you don't let me practice with my team. Stop. You gambled. You knew you weren't supposed to be gambling. And maybe it did legitimately become an addiction for you. It did legitimately become like a serious problem for your life. It sounds like it did. Sounds like he spent a lot of the money he's made. Consequences.
And I hope he gets the help he needs and becomes a better person for it.
And by the way, I also think that the right thing for him, everyone talks about the NFL supplemental draft. You know what I think the right thing for Brendan Sorsby to do is, when he is not deemed eligible this year? Don't go in the supplemental draft. Don't. Wait until next year. You know why? Because you'll be a first-round draft pick. And you'll get a big fat signing bonus. In the supplemental draft, you don't. Yeah, it sucks that you're going to lose your $5 million. That's a consequence. You don't get your Texas Tech NIL money. That's a consequence. That's terrible. This is the hardest lesson that a 20-something-year-old is going to have to learn. But it's not like your life is over. Go play in the UFL for the second half of their season. You've been deemed ineligible to play college football. Go sign for some UNFL team, right? Put some film on tape. And then you'll get invited to the scouting combine. You'll get invited to all this stuff. Just spend your entire year working your behind off, throwing. Nick Bosa was drafted number 2 overall without playing his final year at Ohio State, basically. You're going to get drafted. Sorry that you have to wait longer than you wanted to make the bag, Brendan Sorsby. You shouldn't have gambled on sports.
And by the way, if you are experiencing an extreme mental health problem, addiction is what we're talking about, is what he's claiming here. taking a year off is probably going to be good for you as a person too. Like you said, maybe he plays UFL if he goes that route, so he's not a whole year off. But like taking a significant amount of time off is probably going to be good for your mentals too, my guy. So yeah, I love that advice.
All right, we're going to give away a free round of golf next. We'll do a little crosstalk next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Eight seven seven 353 I've got a free round of golf courtesy of the Festival of Tees, brought to you by the Utah Golf Association and Mountain Home Services. Sun Hills is the golf course today. 877-353-0700. We talked about this. I hope you're listening to the whole show. the CSC, the College Sports Commission, is managing the paperwork right now on roughly how many millions of NIL deals. The number they've either approved or are being asked to approve since the beginning of January 2026. What's the total number reported in the Ross Dellinger article on NIL deals that the CSC is handling and trying to adjudicate? It's a big, fat number. And bonus points if you know how much of the total money is only for the Big Ten and the SEC. Because, wow. 877-353-0700. Final segment of the show is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. For $2,500 off 10 windows or more, give them a phone call. Tell them you want to set up an appointment to measure, to install some windows, and tell them OC sent you. The drive with Spence Checketts is actually the drive without Spence Checketts today. It's Porter Larson and Tony Parks. What's up, fellas?
Not a whole lot. Busy weekend, so a lot to get to. And yes, I did listen to the whole show, by the way.
All right. So good. There's about 5 minutes of the show I want to erase, but we'll leave that part out.
Yeah, Devin Lloyd plays for
he plays for
Carolina.
Another big cat, not the Jaguars anymore.
Jaguars, Panthers,
But you know how bad that bugs you when it happens.
It's an understandable
But you
mistake.
know how irritating when you get it wrong? Oh, it's the worst.
But also, you can be excused for, not being entirely checked in football-wise until August, September.
Man,
if you got the rosters figured out by then, you're okay.
I don't know if I'll give myself that leeway. It's a big number. Hopefully you were listening. And this is not the question, so I'll put this out there. I want to pick your brain on it before I turn you over to the drive. 75% of the NIL money being processed by the College Sports Commission is for Big Ten and SEC schools. 75%.
The gap's getting wider.
Total. It's the gap. The gap is so wide that the only way to leap the gap is to get invited to those places.
Yeah. That's becoming the very clear reality.
The new Pac-12 made a big announcement this weekend. Oh my gosh, we're going to get $13 million per year per school. That's so great. That is wonderful. Until you see 90 million, 75 million, 82 million going to the big boys.
Well, and there's a reason that some of these schools are declining that conference money, right? As far as the equity deals.
Yeah. And
going in favor of their own equity deals because they're not sure what conference necessarily they're going to be in or they want to be in 5-10 years, right? So there's I think a pretty smart push to handle it in-house and try to find the avenue you're going to hopefully be in the future. Because as we've learned over the last couple of years, and listen, this is not new, the conference chaos. We saw it with the Big East basketball 10, 15 years ago. We saw it with the WAC, 20, 30 years ago. Like, conferences are continuously changing and evolving, but the last 2 years, 3 years, it's reached a point where it's very clear that everything's accumulating at the top, and you want to be there.
Let me ask you this. Tony, I want you to answer first. It's an unfair question. How much longer does the NCAA as an authority exist? How much longer do they
2 years ago?
I mean, yeah. It's funny you call them an authority figure at this point, but I know what you mean.
Because,
no, their days could be numbered for sure. I mean, I was at this luncheon, gosh, how many months ago was it now? It was 2 months ago. Yeah, 2 months ago. Tony Petitti was there, Big Ten commissioner. He's a smart guy, man. And they know how to build business, and they know how to keep expanding it, and they know how to. And it was great listening to him talk because the pedal is down. And his whole thing was, this is the new landscape, and with everything we've ever done, and everything he's ever done, that they are going to be the very best at it, and understanding all the elements that truly flex all the muscles that make you the best at what you do. And then when you start to see the gap, like you're seeing it, and there's some of the advantages to the Big Ten anyway, but how it's operated is at optimal level. And so now the money is going to be so heavy that the control is now going to be moved to places like that at some point. Sure. And maybe the NCAA oversees it, but the Big Ten has a lot to say.
What does it look like after that?
What's going on?
It may still be called the NCAA.
Right. Sure.
But it's going to look a whole lot different.
It's a licensing fee. The powers that be are saying, wink, wink, we're still called National Collegiate Athletic Association. But what we really are is we are a professional athletics organization, some combination of SEC and Big Ten, and hopefully Utah and BYU get invited to that party in some capacity. And if they don't, then they're left in the dust like everyone else is. It's going to be crazy because, I mean, this report from Sam Dellinger, who does a good job, stresses that the College Sports Commission, which was slapped together and told, you get to decide what NIL deals go through. Well, these universities are like, you haven't approved half of the money that we have secured for our student athletes. We're waiting. And they're like, well, we might not approve these. And they're just like, okay, so you're going to say no, and I'm going to say bleep you, and I'm going to give the kid the money anyway.
See you in court.
And we will just get wrapped up in court for the next 5 years because I promised this 18-year-old kid and his grandma and his dad and his mom and his uncle and his high school coach that he's a millionaire for coming to Ohio State, or he's a millionaire for playing for the University of Utah. And you're not going to make me out to be a liar because you don't like that the money came from a car dealership to us and then to the kid instead of from us to the car dealership and then to the kid. Like, they're just going to say, we're not paying attention to you anymore. Like, we all did this to our parents at one point where they were like, you can't do that. And we're like, I'm gonna.
Well, and we've already done this with the NCAA at one point, and they got laughed out of court. So now are we just going to repeat this process where you're fighting similar battles that the NCAA got with those rulings, but now you're doing it against a conference or against a institution on their own?
Yeah. Like,
it's hard to know where the policing is going to come from and where the responsibility lies, but it leaves a lot of questions, OC. I think conferences, mainly the big two, are going to have some sort of entity, and it probably will be the NCAA, to like take the blame, take the hit for it, and it's just going to look a whole lot different than it has in the last 25 years. But I don't know how much teeth there are there as far as the enforcement goes.
That's where the CSC was asked to be the teeth, and then their authority has already worn thin on the real powers that be in less than 12 months.
They do hold eligibility now, right? Like that's what they can decide on. But then now we're putting the consequences on the 18-year-olds, right?
The thing about,
it's like Brendan Sorsby's situation. Well, his is a little unique because he's gambling. But where was the guardrails beyond that, before that, right? To get to that point.
They could have been put in place, but instead the NCAA was fighting for years to try to keep every single dime. And so instead of having a realistic system, when it was time to start sharing, now the other side is trying to keep every single dime, and that's why it's a huge mess for all of us. But
trying to keep every single dime and also maybe wager it on some Hoosiers games while you're wearing a Hoosiers uniform. Like, of course, that one's an extreme example. If you're wearing Indiana red and white, maybe don't hit that parlay. But that's not my place.
The Drive with Porter Larson and Tony Parks will go until 6 today. The Sean O'Connell Show is done. We'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks for listening, but stay tuned for The Drive. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.